Recording in progress.
Thank you.
Attendees are coming in now, right?
Yeah, the people are coming in now, the attendees.
Good up here.
We did have quite a healthy registration number. So last count I had was over 150, it was like 160 something. So I would imagine we'd have a good turnout.
Michelle's last figure was 193.
Okay. Well, right now it's just 30 something on. I guess the biggest challenge would be that this is lunchtime. So okay. All right, I think we'd probably get started because we have quite a full program. So let me say a warm welcome to all to this second Small Island Developing States Internet Governance Forum being held over this virtual platform. It was in 2022 that the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, and in particular the Dynamic Coalition on SIDS out of the United Nations Internet Governance Forum, collaborated on putting on the first SIDS IGF. It was in August of 2022, actually. And it was held virtually in conjunction with our 18th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. Through the collaboration, we realized that the value, say, of leveraging the CTU's experience and our resources as well from about 18 years of putting on the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum to basically highlight the need to enhance focus on SIDS issues and SIDS imperatives in the internet governance space. We had noted from our participation in this internet governance space at the UN level, at the Caribbean and at the level of many other internet organizations, that there was really a lack of official recognition of the SIDS constituency in the context of internet governance institutions and their procedures. And what that meant was, in fact, we in the Caribbean ourselves have a little taste of that, because in most of the international organizations, we fall into a world region that is called Latin America and the Caribbean, or in some cases, maybe the whole Americas. So, and the Caribbean being a small but diverse group of countries, often have a challenge having our voices heard in these bigger fora. So from our experience in working in internet governance, we realize, there are challenges that SIDS are facing, and maybe we need to get together to make some common advocacy for SIDS issues in internet governance. So out of that first SIDS IGF in August of 2022, there was a commitment to sustain a periodic SIDS IGF basically for this purpose. And since that time, the CTU in particular, I could talk about our own advocacy efforts specifically. We have advocated for recognition in the various internet and internet governance organizations for SIDS issues. Our most success to date has been in ICANN, that's the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, the international organization that manages the domain name system and oversees internet addresses and so on. We've had ICANN commit to hosting an ongoing SIDS space periodically as part of their ongoing public policy meetings. And ICANN has 3 public policy meetings each year. We did have an initial meeting at the last one in Puerto Rico in early March. And I'm happy to say that we had the vice presidents, the ICANN vice presidents from multiple world regions getting together with us in this advocacy for SIDS, and it was in that forum that a commitment was given to create a SIDS space going forward. The next one within ICANN should be at their public meeting in the 4th quarter of this year. So we are happy to see that happening, and we plan to take advantage of that opportunity to, advance SIDS issues. So the SIDS4 UN conference, of course, presented a natural platform for us to advance our advocacy for SIDS issues in internet governance. And especially so, given what I would call the almost universal thrusts towards digital transformation in almost any country that you would go to. So given that the SIDS4 conference is taking place in Antigua and Barbuda here this week, right in our CTU backyard, we again collaborated with the DC SIDS coalition to put together this second SIDS IGF under what I would call the well-aligned theme of leveraging digital governance for resilient prosperity in SIDS. Aligned meaning aligned to the overall theme of the SIDS4 conference. I'm just right now sharing the agenda for this second SIDS IGF, and it'll actually take place in 2 parts. Today, this afternoon, we are having a virtual session, a fully virtual session, and the agenda, we call it part 1 under the theme of leveraging digital governance for resilient prosperity. And we will have multiple keynote speakers. We'll have then a short break and 2 particular panel discussions. You would have seen the agenda posted on the event website, and if you go to the CTU website, you can find the latest provisional agenda there. So this is really the first item on the agenda, the opening remarks from myself as CTU Deputy Secretary General. I'm Nigel Castamere, and we would move on eventually, subsequently, with the rest of the agenda, dealing with, and the first speaker would be Mr. Esau Tupua. But just before we do that, I do see a hand raised. And maybe what we can do is see what particular issue is being brought up there. It's a hand raised among the attendees. Is there a possibility of finding out what that particular issue would be. Or maybe we could ask if the person who raised their hand, we'll probably allow this particular intervention because it might be something administrative that needs to be done. So if my CTU colleagues could enable Mr. Charles Douglas to take the floor. Is it possible at this time?
I see he pulled down his hand, Nigel.
Oh, it was raised in error. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. What I would ask is also, at any point in time, you can put a comment into the chat. Particularly if it's not something that that requires an intervention on the floor. So the chat should be available to all attendees to make comments. So I would stop there in terms of my current intervention and with respect to opening remarks. Welcome all again to the second Small Island Development SIDS IGF. And we will move into our first keynote. And the topic we will be hearing about relates to national strategies for digital inclusion. And the speaker is Mr. Eso Topu. He is the director of CERT Tonga, that's the Computer Emergency Response Team out of Tonga. And he's also the CEO in the Ministry of Meteorology, Energy, Information, Disaster Management, the Environment, Communications, and Climate Change. So, Mr. Topu, let me give you the floor for your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Mr. Nortney Taylor, Secretary General of Caribbean Telecommunication Union, Mr. Nigel Casimir, Deputy Secretary General for CTU, Honorable Ministers, distinguished colleagues, esteemed academics, researchers, and development practitioners, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, I am Esau Tupo, the Director of Tonga Computer Emergency Response Team, known as CERT Tonga. I work for the Chief Executive Officer of the Ministry of MATEC, which is the Ministry of Meteorology, Energy, Information, Disaster Management, Environment, Communication, and Climate Change, or better known as MATEC. I am honored to address you on behalf of the Ministry of MATEC from the Government of Tonga, representing the Chief Executive Officer as well as the Minister. First of all, I acknowledge the Almighty God who made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of water. I thank the Deputy Secretary General of CTU for his memorable opening remarks. Also, acknowledging the fourth International Conference of the Small Island Developing States theme of charting the course toward resilient prosperity. National strategies for digital inclusion is fundamental to bridging the digital divide in small island developing states. This requires guidance and support protected in policies through the creation of national strategies for digital inclusion. National strategies for digital inclusion are necessary for a strong digital economy. To bridge the digital divide and build a stronger, more inclusive and sustainable digital economy, digital inclusion must be incorporated into the policy as well as funding assessments. National strategies for digital inclusion will specify common sets of goals for all levels of government to plan, support, and fund digital inclusion initiatives in an organized manner. Effective national strategies for digital inclusion must be developed and implemented in consultation with multi-stakeholder approach, consisting of national governments, community and technology sectors, civil society, private sectors, and those most at risk of digital exclusion. equal digital inclusion of native peoples in the most remote islands is essential. Most small island developing states have remote and isolated islands with locals having no access to the internet or mobile phone networks. The further outer islands digital inclusion plan urgently needed strategies to be developed in consultation with local communities and organizations towards solving digital inclusion. No one is left behind campaign is needed for this gap. Firstly, affordable access for all. Affordable, robust broadband internet access remains a key barrier for many small island developing states to be digitally included. Not everyone has the digital devices or internet access they need to get online. Ensuring that all small island developing states can affordably access the internet and have the appropriate computers, smartphones, or handheld devices is crucial to solving the island nation's digital divide. Low or no-cost internet connectivity for those who need it most. Affordability measures from telecommunication companies such as community organization delivered telco bill assistance program or extended hardship agreement provision would be most sufficient in the right direction. However, there still needs to be a low or no-cost option for all island nations to get connected first. Allowing connection will open opportunities for innovations and quality services to the island nations. Second, digital devices for all at all times. Internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user. Without digital devices to connect to the internet, the issue of access still remains. During the COVID-19 pandemic, some or all of the people who are digital literate lacked digital devices to use at home. Online learning systems were established during the lockdown. However, not all homes and students have access to digital devices or computers. Distributing digital devices through the community sector means that people have access to a suitable device and are able to supported to use the device in a trusted environment. Third, digital skills support for everyone. Access to digital literacy training. It is not enough to have access to technology. Everyone also needs to have the skills and confidence to use their digital devices and the internet. It is critical that everyone has the digital ability and confidence to participate in work, study, and connect with family, friends, and essential services online. Not everyone in the island nations has the access and digital skills they need to fully participate in society, but together we can change this. Community-led digital skill support puts the solution in the hands of local communities, providing essential digital skills for people who need them most. It is vital that digital support is within easy reach for all small island developing states in every city, town, community, and villages across the island nations. Tools that I have mentioned are the three-legged stool of digital inclusion, out of the 5 elements necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and use of information and communication technologies. The other 2 elements are quality technical support and application and online content designed to enable and encourage self-sufficiency, participation, and collaboration. Digital inclusion must evolve as technology advances. Digital inclusion leads to digital equity. Digital equity is a common in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. Digital equity is necessary for civic and cultural participation, employment, lifelong learning, and access to essential services. Once again, I thank the Secretary General of EDU for hosting the second Small Island Developing States Internet Governance Forum, a significant virtual site event as part of the 4th International Conference of Small Island Developing States. Also thank the Executive Assistant CTU, Ms. Tamika Campbell-Carter, for invitation and great opportunity to be part of this great event. I strongly believe that the second SIDS Internet Governance Forum aligns with the SIDS4 Conference theme of charting the course towards resilience prosperity by leveraging the communal experiences and addressing challenges of SIDS to delve into these matters and establish a direction for the digital future to be inclusive, resilient, and sustainable, making small island developing states become more smart island digital states. Thank you. Malo Apito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tupu. I like your alliteration of the SIDS acronym there, Smart Island Developing States. Thanks. And where I noted you also highlighted the key challenges, affordability, which is one that a lot of us also face, availability of devices as well, and technical support and skill development. Thank you very much. I see a few comments saying thank you very much. I don't see any specific questions raised. So what we'll do is then move on for the time being to our next speaker. And this is Mr. Hugo Blanco. He's actually the resident representative for the United Nations Development Program, responsibility for Trinidad and Tobago, Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin. And Hugo is going to talk to us about the role of ICTs in the sustainable development of SIDS. And I'm sure he'll tell us, I'm sure he'll also make mention of a recent seminar that the UNDP held on this same topic in preparation for SIDS4. So, Mr. Hugo Blanco, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Nigel. Let me stand by the protocol established, but acknowledge and thank SG Taylor and CTU team for this invitation. Happy to share a couple of key messages with the participants. As you said, Nigel, we had the pleasure here in Trinidad and Tobago to co-host a regional event on digitalization for the region that is very much linked to the subjects of this agenda. So I'll be touching upon certainly some of the outcomes of those conversations with 20 countries early on this month. Sustainable development and ICT. Sustainable development, we know what it is. Practice of trying to meet our current needs without compromising the capacity to do so for the future generations. And this is about economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental protection. ICTs are the center of this conversation nowadays. Before we talk about leaving no one behind, we thought about what? We thought about geographically the isolated populations, rural areas. Now, when we talk about leaving no one behind, we think a lot about the digitally disconnected, those that don't have access to technology, to connectivity. Let me just share quickly a couple of slides to, you can see, right? Yes, very good. So I'm gonna use the next 9 minutes, 10 minutes to cover two main areas. One is how ICT contributes to sustainable development in the small island states. And then what are the principles that should guide this development? On this first part on how ICT contributes to sustainable development, I'm gonna share views of the UN family, CTU, and other institutions that are really leading this area. ICT enables us to bridge the digital divide. And this is the theory. Then we can discuss how this happens in practice. But now almost anybody with a smartphone and connectivity has access to almost anything, global networks, participating in the global economy, getting services from governments. And that includes participating in education, in healthcare, in government services. And this is obvious for many of us, but for many others living in rural areas in the past, that was very complicated. They had to drive or to walk or to bike many kilometers, many miles to get to that. So ICT is changing the way we operate, the way we consume films, the way we make our payments, and the way we participate in the governance of our communities and countries. However, and this is something the previous panelists mentioned very strongly, the costs and the availability in SIDS sometimes are prohibited. And there is where we have to have a wider conversation. Is this a commodity that we buy and sell, or this is a right? And in my opinion, in our opinion, this is becoming a right. It's like flying around in between seas in the Caribbean. It's a luxury or it's a need. It's a service we have to have. Then ICT is critical for promoting economic growth. Our economies are built around growth. So ICT is again at the center with new industries, new services, e-commerce, digital tourism, or even remote work opportunities that are driving economic new pillars, creating jobs and promoting resilience. This is very important for everybody, but even more for small and medium enterprises that can reach larger markets. They can improve their efficiencies and they have more tools to become more efficient. There are almost at your fingertips trainings about mobile money, about digital financial management of small and medium enterprises. There is a large platform for MSMEs that can tap into to become more competitive. And again, remember we are talking about SIDS. So going beyond the small markets, going to regional markets and perhaps even global markets. The element of environmental sustainability. ICT is giving us new tools to monitor how we are doing in our fields, in our farms, in our natural resources, with geographic information systems and data that can help us to monitor progress, to be more efficient, but also to promote conservation of our sustainable resources. And we, SIDS, we are very vulnerable and reliant on some of these resources, even natural resources, but also those economies driven by tourism. So the relevance of ICT for managing our natural resources is critical, because climate change is here. That's not the main topic of this conversation, but we have to adapt and we have to manage the risks. And ICT help us to provide more information, more reliable information, more on-time information and early warning systems, communications and channel and share information. Now everybody else on WhatsApp. That help us, and everybody means virtually everybody, or at least one smartphone in the household. I'm saying this because we are working with vulnerable communities on how to make sure early warning information about disaster reach the most vulnerable, and this is fairly efficient. One of the main elements of ICT obviously is e-governance and social development. How the government, how the national institutions are revolutionizing, I think that's the word in English, the way they operate, the way they provide services. Because this is about being more transparent, being more accountable. I know who is paying what. If I got a fine, a traffic fine, I know that I have to go to this system, I have to pay there, and I know when I pay how much and to whom. And it's more efficient in public administration, fostering better governance practices. Obviously, this requires a transition. This requires building the capacity in the national institutions of the civil servants. And that's a process that SIDS needs to embrace. The second part of the e-governance is the empowering of the communities, as again, Mr. Topu mentioned it before. Let me mention here one of the main products, UNDP, sorry for the publicity here, but is a human development report. We talk about how we are doing globally. This year's report, launched last month, talks about how our world is becoming more and more polarized. Different views are leading now to tensions, and these tensions are leading to violence. And that leads us to a situation of gridlock when we become paralyzed and not much is happening. So one of the recommendations of this report is empowering communities. Why? Because now citizens don't feel part of the decision-making bodies. My opinion as citizen doesn't count. It doesn't matter what I say, what I think. Someone higher up there is going to take a decision. However, ICT facilities promote this community engagement, their participation. in decision-making processes. So it's strengthening the social cohesion, the fabric, especially on marginalized groups. And we are seeing this across the region in SIDS, but also globally. And there is strong discussions about democracy and development. And I think ICT can play a main role. We are not going to be talking about miscommunication, fake news, etc., because that's probably another topic for conversation. And let me close this first part of my short presentation about the idea that ICT is critical for learning. And now, again, we are in SIDS, small countries, limited resources offer. Now, that's not the case in terms of education anymore. I can do a master's degree on anthropology from the University of Australia, Canberra. And this is at my fingertips. And this is a revolution with new skill development programs that are available to almost any of us. And obviously, this requires a new skill set in our countries. So we benefit of the digital economy and foster innovation and will create more opportunities for enhancing employability. So all in all, ICT in SIDS can overcome the geographical and economic constraints we are used to. A small island. I don't really like that acronym, so that's why we are talking about smart island states, small island digital states. But ICT is changing the way we operate, the way we live, and the way we interact as a society. I'm conscious about my time, but let me cover, Nigel, if that's okay, another 5 minutes to mention the main principles on this ICT and sustainable development. And let me mention that this is not Hugo's or UNDP's views. This is the outcome of the high-level conference on digital pathways. Nigel, you mentioned early on, where 20 countries and territories of the Caribbean met earlier this month. And thanks to the CTU for being a great support in the conversation. And we agreed on a kind of common framework and few principles. Let me mention them very quickly. First,
go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Nigel. First and foremost, society first digital transformation. People have to be at the forefront of the digitization process. It's not the case everywhere. Sounds obvious, but we are realizing that that's not the case. Sometimes we go ahead with EIDs, electronic IDs, we go ahead with e-mobile, and not enough engagement, not enough buy-in, not enough participation from communities is there. And that delays processes, and that contributes to the digital divide and their franchising. So people first, that's a key principle that I think has to lead digitalization and sustainable development in SIDS. Secondly, something CTU is leading is regional integration. As SIDS, we have to come together. We are too small to be working in silos or isolated manner. We, as Caribbean islands and SIDS, and bringing in obviously the Pacific and others, we have to come into agreements, leverage on existing institutions to strengthen national responses for us and for the region. And there is a lot of good initiatives there, sometimes not fully utilized. And I think that's an opportunity there. Third point, cybersecurity. We have to be really committed and coordinated to address cybersecurity. Big issue, big risk, a threat for systems, but a threat also for the trust citizens have in digital processes. It's not an easy one. I'm not gonna deny it, but if any solution goes through partnerships, working together, sharing best practices and resources. Number 4, something also Mr. Tupu has mentioned, is about national sovereignty and resilience. So countries here in Trinidad agree that technologies, designs and choices have to consider the sovereignty of the region, leveraging digital public goods to avoid vendor lock-ins and build the capacity of regional expertise. How we, again, as a small, we are exposed sometimes to bigger players, to the big dynamics of the market. Let's be smart, let's think long-term, not only short-term. Let's think what are the implications of the decisions we as policymakers take and what is the impact my country, my population will have in the near future. So national sovereignty is critical. Interoperability, this has to do a lot with coming together, finding ways that we can work together across identity, payment, data flows, protection of the rights to reduce the friction and promote business opportunities. Movement of talent and sharing capacities, again, using the best we have as a region. Sorry, again, I'm thinking as a Caribbean, but this goes beyond the Caribbean. And we are talking about the free movement of people, of goods. What about the free movement of talent? So we can be a champion on some of these areas, even though we are small in terms of population. Strengthening digital ecosystems. I link this to medium and small enterprises and the need for us, the policymakers, to create enabling environments for our businesses to reach global markets. And two more, I close with this, response, demand-driven, agile, technical assistance. Sometimes our capacity, the capacity of our institutions are limited. We are few, handling too many priorities, too many balls in the air right now. This is complex discussions, data centers, EIDs, cybersecurity. We need technical expertise. Let's have a pool of experts that can provide this expertise to governments. And I'm happy, obviously, that to UNDP to be part of that. We have launched a facility. It's called Digital Support Facility for the Caribbean, where together with CAF, together with other partners, the Ministry of Digital Transformation, we are ready to support countries with technical assistance and others. And the last point I'll do, dear Chair, is the need for harmonization, coordination, standardization, and coherence. We have to talk the same language. We have to mean the same when we talk about interoperability, when we talk about data centers in these countries. So coming together with a common framework, a common language that help us to promote the use of the shared objectives and dimensions and metrics is very, very important. And for that, the SIDS 2.0, the Small Island Digital States Initiative, with 5 digital pathways and clear dimensions and metrics, I think can help a lot to countries to assess where they are in terms of digitalization towards this SIDS 2.0, Small Island Digital States, and how they can move to the next level with the support of partners. Nigel, I think I'm up to my time, but I hope I cover the key messages. Over. Thanks again.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Hugo, for that. And I think the points listed at the end were good to summarize the way in terms of moving forward. We have had a couple of comments and questions crop up here. One on the Q&A part that Mr. Tupu gave a response to relates to the need for SIDS to consider their digital infrastructure as critical infrastructure. And Mr. Tupu drew in fact, the example of Tonga's recent experience with the volcanic eruption that had them offline and incapacitated for some days. I see other comments in the chat. There was a comment to Hugo. Maybe you could look at it from Hugo from Matthew Cohen and see if you want to respond to that. And acknowledgements from Russell and Tracy in terms of, I would say positive responses to what has gone before. So I think we are going pretty well. So let me continue on for the time being. I keep forgetting to mention, as you can see in the video picture of our site here at the hotel in Antigua, there is someone sitting next to me, and this is Ms. Nia Nanan, who is our senior research analyst at the CTU Secretariat. So my apologies for not pointing out her presence to you earlier. So we move on in the program for the time being to the next presenter. The next presenter is Dr. Renata Duan. She is a special advisor in the Office of the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology. We've heard the initial speakers talk about the value of the technology for SIDS development. And I myself made mention that almost universally, we hear of governments having a thrust towards digital transformation. Certainly at the UN level, there is a very important process that has been ongoing over the past few years at the level of the Secretary General, who published a document a few years ago, Our Common Agenda. And in implementing our common agenda, it has led this year to the development of a Summit of the Future, which would take place in September in New York. And a key document going to that Summit of the Future, which looks at future developments at a global level, is a document which we call the Global Digital Compact. And that would seek to codify commitments that our nations, members of the UN, would take up in terms of assuring what I lose the adjective, but appropriate development for all members of the UN family through the use of ICT. And as I said, there is a process ongoing with this, and Dr. Duan is going to give us an update on this UN process. And subsequent to that, we would look at what the draft of this digital compact is in a little more detail. So I would ask now Dr. Duan, Special Advisor in the UN's Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, to take the floor to tell us about the GDC process. Dr. Duan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Casimir, or Nigel, if I may, and yes. Lovely to be with you all, colleagues. I have an origin from a small island state. I come from Ireland, but I'm currently with the UN, so I'm islandless. And in Switzerland right now, where I'm attending the WSIS Forum, the World Summit on Information Society annual forum. And very much, I think, in part of these debates is at the center. The previous two speakers have made my job a lot easier, because they've really set out just why digital transformation is so central to the social, the economic development and well-being of people, of communities, and of countries. So I think you've really set out the case of not just often the practical issues, but also the human-centric aspects of people being able to fulfill their potential and their needs by having access to and the ability to access the internet, but also meaningfully access and use through digital literacy and capabilities, and safe. Maybe what I'm going to do is just briefly outline to you what the GDC is and why that might be relevant for SIDS. And then what I'm going to do, because I know Serena is following, and she will give you a very detailed reading of all the aspects of this SID. So maybe I'll just take a stand back and say, why now? Why this Global Digital Compact? And many of you will be involved in the Internet Governance Forum. Many of you are involved in the WSIS processes. So you're very aware of what have been the frameworks for multi-stakeholder approaches to the Internet, and indeed efforts around digital transformation. I would just flag that, as Nigel noted, the Global Digital Compact idea is not new. It's been around since at least 2020 and the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation. And really thinking about why that plays such a part, I think first is the notion that we have really moved away from a focus on connectivity as a physical activity to understanding digital transformation, as Mr. Tupa outlined to us, as a whole of society activity. We need it now, not only so that we are connected, and we are not only engaged in thinking about innovative solutions for small island developing states to have access to connectivity, but we're really thinking about every aspect of our society and every aspect of our digital governance and public services, and indeed our interaction as members of a society navigated through the internet. and through digital technologies and through digital tools. And so in a way, we've moved from being an information society and a knowledge society to really being a digital environment and societies that are using digital transformation for our transformation. I think it's important to keep reminding ourselves that digital transformation and cooperation around digital technologies is ultimately a means to an end. We shouldn't become obsessed with the technology itself. It's what we're trying to achieve with the technology that we need to keep in mind. But it has meant that our governments and our societies need to take a whole of society and whole of government approach to digitalization. And that's often a challenge for us, many of our structures and our societies, and which we tend to operate in silos, and for good reason. So really, I think the feature that the Secretary General wanted to put around with global digital cooperation is we've seen in COVID our dependency on these instruments, on digital access. We've seen just the incredible role it can play in allowing us to continue our lives. And for small island states, many have faced existential threat, continuing our identity as citizens of a state. But it's also thrown also the question of harms and really revealed the inequalities. The countries and the societies that were able to participate in the digital economy were able to continue during COVID. The societies and the communities and the groups that weren't suffered hugely and took huge back steps in the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think it showed us the two faces, the yin and the yang. It also showed us the harms of digital technologies if improperly managed and used. And we acknowledge and must acknowledge the incredible challenges that access and universal and meaningful access present for us as societies, for our coherence as a society and for the safety of all individuals in it and the well-being. So I think the Secretary General has felt strongly that we need to renew and revitalize our momentum around global digital cooperation. And we need to do that to do three things. One, to really harness the benefits and address the risks in a really lessons learned of the last 2 decades since the World Summit on Information Society. Two, we need to have an honest conversation with ourselves about some of the limits of our progress in the last 20 years. And that requires a conversation that says, why do we still have 1/3 of the world without connectivity? And why is so much of the 66, 67% that is connected partially connected? Or why is it that in African states, the highest rates for digital access and connectivity is higher per capita than in any other developed countries? So there's some real challenges that face us that we need to address. And so I think it was a sense of we need to turbocharge and recommit to some of our connectivity and literacy and functions. The third is that we need to update our digital cooperation. Our digital cooperation that WIS has articulated so eloquently in the Geneva and the Tunis agendas addressed questions of spam, didn't address questions of data, addressed questions of access to everyone, didn't address social media platforms because they were not the Facebook was not only coming into being as a social network in a university at that time. So we have to constantly upgrade how we understand digital technology, and we need a much more agile approach to thinking about how we govern it, because it's moving faster than our systems and our abilities at national or international level to keep track. And third, we're dealing with artificial intelligence and the incredible promise that AI offers us to leapfrog the SDGs, to make the catch up, to accelerate progress and development is there. But so too is the real challenge of concentration in an already concentrated digital economy and a world that sees huge divides, including who has access to make value and to generate value in the digital economy. AI risks turbocharging that further. And for SIDS, AI presents particular challenges because if you want to use AI tools as in your public services, you need to have data sets and you need to have representative and sufficiently large data sets to train your AI models to be able to access. So questions of access to large data sets, questions of interoperability, and questions of governance that enable it to be inclusive and participatory and used for development needs are at the forefront of the considerations. So those are some of the three drivers that have really considered, that have led to the Global Digital Compact. As Nigel said, we've been in discussion for over now a year and a half. We've through a series of multi-stakeholder consultations, deep dives looking at various themes. And now we have drafts in front of the member states, and they're beginning to negotiate this Global Digital Compact. I think what I would flag is maybe just of relevance to the SIDS, 3, maybe 4 critical points. The first is the SIDS are mentioned explicitly in the principle on development orientation. So the Global Digital Compact sets out 12 principles to guide digital cooperation. One of them, the very first one, is inclusive. The second one is development oriented. And there it identifies that means targeting the specific digital transformation journeys of least developed countries and small island developing states. So I think there you have that framing in a very key way. The second aspect is it looks at some key objectives that we need to address. The first is closing the digital divides and accelerating progress in the SDGs. There we highlight connectivity, digital literacy, and digital public goods and digital public infrastructure. And I would just flag that there is a call to look at new, more innovative solutions to connectivity for remote and hard to reach areas, so that we need to adapt our ways of thinking, both the financing of them and then the technological means that we're seeking to connect those in, for example, remote island states. And I think what we've tried to do in these areas, these 3 areas, is set concrete targets for achieving alongside the SDGs. So in a way to say to states, you can integrate these digital goals as part of your SDGs. So I think inclusion is a critical theme running through the Global Digital Compact. And perhaps the second objective, which is an expanding inclusion in the digital economy, is really trying to address the issue of what is the enabling environment for developing countries to participate in the digital economy? What is the enabling environment that allows for fair practice to engage? What are the frameworks required to allow small and medium enterprises to participate? And that, I think, is going to be another critical area for SIDS. I think I won't go through all the objectives because I know that Serena will do a very thorough job in that area. I would just highlight maybe 3 other ones in addition to inclusion. I would say interoperability is a theme running through the Global Compact. And that is a question not only because of its potential to enable smaller states or more remote states or all communities to participate in the benefits in the digital economy, but particularly in order to ensure that it's affordable and accessible, because interoperability helps drive down costs. And that argument that interoperability is not just about efficiency, but also about inclusion and participation is one that we feel strongly about. Linked to the interoperability is a strong reference and call for the development of open source standards, software, platforms, models, and tools. Now, I don't want to be overly idealistic about open source options. We know that they must come with safeguards. We know that they must come with the appropriate safety and security aspects. But when developed with those standards in mind, they can be critical drivers for developing countries to get at a market fair price or free access to huge digital solutions and tools. So I think there's a strong pitch in there for digital public goods and that facilitation of interoperability. And the third, there's a proposal in the text for an initiative or process to start amongst governments to look at data governance principles, standards and definitions on data, options for data exchanges and data representation, so that countries can have access to data for their development needs, but also that they can exchange with data so as to build the sorts of data sets that we need for looking at environmental solutions, looking at natural disasters, agricultural planning, education and long-term family planning. How you use and have access to those data sets is going to become critical and is a critical issue for the SIDS, as you know better than I. Fourth, I would say, in addition to the inclusion, or third, in addition to the inclusion and the interoperability, I would flag the sustainability aspect. And here I would say we still have some work to do. I think there's a critical interest in having a framing around the importance of sustainability of digital cooperation and governance, but some caution from some countries around how much they wish to commit to devices being carbon neutral, to looking at options, to look at e-waste, to look at options of principles for the design and the development of technologies that are more environmentally supportive. And that's partly because I think at this moment, as we develop AI with the huge amount of energy and water resources required for that, that has led to some caution in that space. So I would just flag that sustainability is there, but I think we need to really look at that dimension. And in particular, how do we measure environmental digital technologies? How do we know how to make progress, and how can we begin to communicate on that? And finally, I'll make a pitch that the global digital cooperation tries to look at a framework for international cooperation on artificial intelligence. And I think at the root here is a question of whether the international community believes that AI should be a topic addressed by all states in an inclusive and participatory way, or whether it's an issue best dealt with by states with those capabilities. And I think the question and the views of the Secretary General and many of the advisory body on AI that he has is that it's critical we have an inclusive and global participation in the questions of AI governance from the outset, and not as an add-on later when frameworks are in place, when systems are in place, and when governance arrangements are in place, because there is a risk that we don't address the needs then of those most likely to benefit from AI and most likely to fall behind if they don't have access to those technologies. So it includes a proposal for a scientific panel on AI. It includes that would produce horizon scanning reports so that all countries can have access to trends and development. It includes the idea of an annual dialogue on emerging governance approaches to AI that all governments could participate in, and together with experts and multi-stakeholders, so that there is a sense of understanding and exchange right from the outset of what are these emerging AI approaches. Third, there's quite a call for international partnerships on capacity building, and in particular areas around what is the scope for collaboration across and between countries like SIDS, regional neighbours, to develop the data, the compute capacity that is highly resource intensive, and the talent that can navigate the potential for AI. Alongside that, there's a proposal for a fund to support AI and SDGs to fund some of those collaborations, and in particular, the generation of large data sets. So I'll conclude by saying that much of this, especially around connectivity and digital literacy, is not new for you. You'll be very familiar with these issues and you deal with them every day. What I think the Global Digital Compact can do is mobilize and renew that commitment to digital cooperation, as well as set a roadmap for the governance as we go forward of emerging technologies, including but not limited to AI. And can we harness that early in the public interest and for development priorities, as opposed to constantly play catch up as we seek to engage with that? So I very much hope that the SIDS can see in the Global Digital Compact issues that pertain to you. I think there is a question that some have raised: will this be multi-stakeholder? I don't think it's possible to have digital cooperation, and certainly not possible to have digital governance if we don't have the participation of all stakeholders. And I think it makes a strong pitch in that direction. But we will need everyone's active participation if we are to go toward an ambitious Global Digital Compact at a time of geopolitical divides, and at a time where there's caution about how much we wish to commit to resources for digital for development. So very much hope that we can engage as going forward. And thank you for your participation and listening to me today.
Yes. Thank you very much, Renata. I think that was quite a good overview. One of the last things you mentioned was participation, global participation. So with the GDC right now, how might one participate in its further development? Is it just via the website, or is there any other thing that you would suggest?
So that's a great question, Nigel. What I would encourage you to do, and I certainly could be in contact with your teams, to participate in the regular multi-stakeholder updates on the GDC. These have been underway for many years, and in fact, multi-stakeholders were invited to contribute into an open call for participation, views on what they thought the compact should look like, what it should address, key priorities for it. They were invited to comment in writing on the draft itself, the outline, and on the draft. We've now moved into this more sort of intergovernmental phase. But the co-facilitators, which are the governments of Sweden and Zambia, are very keen to continue regular updates from multi-stakeholders. And you would have a chance to participate and engage in that discussion. And I'd be happy to make sure that you're on the mailing list for the next multi-stakeholder consultation. I'd encourage you also to work through your IGFs. The IGF has been a very active participant, the leadership panel, the MAG, national IGFs have participated, youth networks have participated in the multi-stakeholder consultations. And then finally, I'd encourage you to participate in your through your governments. Really engage with them to make sure that when they sit at the negotiating table, they bring your priorities and they bring the issues that are central for those of you who are practitioners and will really up close understand what some of the challenges are. I'd make a plea too to help us keep the level of ambition high. I think whenever we negotiate with 193 states, the tendency to arrive at somewhat of a sort of lower level is always there. There are many other different priorities. But could I just flag that one thing that I've really heard from Singapore and other states has been this idea that it will be critical to think about moving from the SDGs to a digital agenda environment. So the future of the SDGs post-2030 will have digital front and center of it. And this is a way that we can begin that process already. So every action listed in the tasks in the Global Digital Compact is referenced to which SDGs it's talking about. So I think that would be really great to have ways that you could participate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Renata. I think given the time, I will go straight on to the rest of the discussion about the GDC and invite our next speaker, Ms. Sorena Tileanu, who is the Director of Knowledge at the Diplo Foundation, to give us a little more detail about the GDC and its current state. So Sorena, over to you, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Hello, everyone. Not an easy task to follow Renata with trying to unpack the GDC, which is not something we have written, but let me give it a try. I do have a few slides, so I'm going to try to share those. And I also hope I'll finish quickly so we have a bit of discussion of concerns and priorities and whatever you might want to share from the region. Let me see the magic of sharing. And I'm guessing you can see my screen. If someone can just nod, that would be useful. Thank you, Renata.
Yes, we are seeing it, yes.
Thanks a lot. Right, so Renata already mentioned WSIS, which is the World Summit for the Information Society, and I felt it's good to start a bit with the background. So we are sure we are all on the same page. I think I'm still hearing you from there, Nigel. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. No worries. Thanks. Right. So a bit of a background. We have been talking a bit about the World Summit on Information Society, and Renata mentioned that there is this WSIS forum happening in Geneva this week. And I just wanted to highlight once again that this all discussion about the Global Digital Compact is not happening in a vacuum. There have been things happening for quite a while, and that goes back to the World Summit on the Information Society, which was in 2003, 2005. When the world basically came together and started thinking about what we can do to build this more inclusive information society, which was the terminology used back then. So it's been quite some years since we were discussing about this broader inclusiveness, bridging the digital divide, making technologies a bit more accessible. How much have we achieved of that? I guess it's a question for everyone to still look at, and that's why we're still discussing WSIS implementation these days, including here in Geneva. Renata mentioned we have a few documents adopted back then, a declaration of principle, plan of action, commitment, and an agenda, with quite a few detailed so-called action lines for things that countries and other stakeholders wanted to achieve as soon as possible. And what you see on the screen are actually all of them action lines, and you see what the focus was around. A lot on access, a lot on capacity building, cooperation, and a bunch of other things that are still relevant today. So we had WSIS back in 2003, 2005, and out of WSIS, a bunch of processes, a bunch of implementation mechanisms have been launched to look at what can be done and what should be done and what is actually being done to implement those action lines. And again, have a more inclusive information society, more secure use of technologies, and everything related to that. Yes, we were talking about slightly different things 20 years ago when it comes to technology. AI was not something on everyone's mind. Google was just being, launched a few years back in 1998. So maybe not the same amount of challenges and not the same depth of challenges, but many of the issues we were dealing with back then are still pretty much relevant today as we're discussing new processes and new mechanisms. We had the IGF as an outcome of this, and I'm not going to mention that because, well, we are at an IGF right now, which means you're all familiar with what this means. We had the UN Group on the Information Society, which is supposed to help coordinate activities across UN agencies when it comes to implementation of WSIS action lines, and again, driving a bit more of an inclusive. I still use Information Society because this was the terminology back then, but we can also easily change it to digital society or whatever other terms we're using these days. And as we're looking forward next year, there will be the WSIS Plus 20 high-level event at the General Assembly, which will be looking back at these 20 years and the extent to which we have implemented or not the WSIS action lines and the ambitious goals that were set back then as well. So this year we do have discussions about the Global Digital Compact, about strengthening digital cooperation, but then there's also a discussion about how we're linking this with what's going to happen next year in the context of the review of WSIS action lines and their implementation, and also the upcoming deadline for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, which unfortunately, I think we all agree we haven't done very well at achieving. So again, just a bit of a background of how we have actually gotten here. Renata also mentioned that there have been quite a few documents issued by the Secretary General. We had the agenda for digital cooperation, the high-level panel on digital cooperation. So everything is in some way connected to everything. The question from here on is how we're actually building on these connections as we look more carefully into implementation. So we're also asking a bit what changed again between 2003, 2005, and right now when we're discussing the GDC and the review of WSIS action lines. And we have heard a few things about artificial intelligence being something pretty new, content governance, which is not something we were discussing in 2003. And that's true. These are issues that we were not discussing back then. But also if we go through the action lines and objectives of the WSIS documents, many of the elements there, for instance, around ethics, around safety and security, still pretty much apply to these areas, even if back then we were not necessarily talking about them in these terms. So what I'm trying to say is that we should also look a bit at connecting things from back then with whatever we're discussing right now. And this is there are a lot of discussions this week, for instance, in Geneva about this. For a bit of fun, we did this exercise at Diplo where we took all the documents from 2003, 2005, the WSIS outcome documents, and simply replaced Information Society with Digital Society, ICT with Digital Technology, just to see if we only change the terminology, how much of this document is still relevant. And I guess it's not going to be a surprise for anyone that if you just read it with slightly different terminology, it all still applies, and we all still need to do a little more to implement what we agreed back then while we look forward at new goals and objectives. Finally, going into the Global Digital Compact, I have quite a few detailed slides, so I'm not going to spend too much time into that. I'll share this with everyone so you can go and read them afterwards, in the quietness of your own space. But I do want to highlight a few things because what I also wanted to do was to look at the contribution that I think CTU coordinated, I think in April last year from the Caribbean IGF and also from the SIDS IGF, and provided this input when the Office of the Tech Envoy ran the public consultation on things to be included in the GDC. So what I did was to try to look a bit at the priorities outlined in that document and how those might or might not be reflected in the GDC. What you see on the next screen is the most recent version of the Global Digital Compact, which is the so-called Rev 1, Revision 1, which is built on the previous version, which was the zero draft. So you will also see some highlights with the changes. A few overarching reflections, also repeating a bit what Renata has been saying. There are a lot of commitments in the GDC, some with timelines, like we want to do this by 2030, for instance, others without timelines. There is a very strong anchoring of the commitments into SDGs, which is a good thing because, again, we're trying to connect things a bit better and seeing how we can actually leverage the digital technologies for achieving sustainable development. There are some very detailed specific goals, but not all over the place. And I guess that's something also that governments can continue working on as the negotiations advance. And what I like the most, I think, is this recognition of the need for digital governance solutions to actually reflect the different needs and realities across the world. So it's not, the UN from New York saying this is what the whole of the world should be doing, but rather seeing how these objectives and goals could be adapted to the realities of the communities, the countries actually implementing them. And as Renata again already mentioned, there are a few proposals for new mechanisms, in particular around artificial intelligence. These are the principles that were mentioned before. What you see with strike changes and red underlined are the differences from the previous version. Not going to spend time here. The multi-stakeholder principle that was mentioned before is here as well, forward-looking, innovation-friendly, and all the things we really would like to see driving digital cooperation as we go forward. And these are the objectives and commitments around each of the objectives. So closing the digital divide that Renata spent a bit of time explaining with connectivity, skills, digital public goods and digital public infrastructure, expanding the inclusion and benefits from the digital economy. Then this very broad chapter, which is including human rights, internal governance, trust and safety, and then information integrity around misinformation, disinformation, and whatnot. With this very long title of fostering an inclusive, open, safe, secure digital space that respects, promotes, and protects human rights. Fourth, around advancing international data governance. And finally, the fifth objective and set of commitments is around the governance of emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence. Again, those are the changes from the previous version, if anyone is curious to see what changed over the past few months. So I'm not going to spend time on this either because Renata has done an excellent job covering it. We're talking about closing all digital divides, accelerating process across SDGs, doing connectivity and all of this. Just a few pointers on things that have changed and on things that might be worthwhile paying attention to as the negotiations continue. So the recognition of innovative solutions that can help deliver better connectivity, a very interesting addition to the new version. Whatever we mean by these innovative solutions, quite a lot of references to environmental sustainability, which is also something that was included in the contribution from that the CTU coordinated last year. The inclusion of marginalized communities and persons with from vulnerable, again, communities in the development and implementation of digital connectivity strategy, and a bunch of other things, again, related to connectivity. And this is what you, the community, were saying a little over a year ago about what you think the needs would be important to be reflected in the GDC. I think some of them are pretty well reflected in this, including the zero draft, but also in the Rev 1. Including around data collection funds, maybe not specifically around IXPs, which is a very specific issue, or around universal service funds, but there are quite a few other references there. This need for consideration and public awareness of the environmental risks posed by digital technologies is also reflected in the Global Digital Compact, but maybe not necessarily with the strong emphasis you might be having from the small island developing states with the more immediate threats you're facing there. Digital literacy skills and capacity are a lot around building the skills of individuals to interact with technologies, also use the technologies for the achievement of whatever goals they have, economic, social interactions with others and whatnot. development of digital competencies of public officials, where we also have a bit of a question whether we want to only develop the competencies of public officials when it comes to development of digital public services, or whether there is a bit more we want to train them on. But these are issues of nuances. And then quite a lot to focus on promoting decent work, creating this kind of safety nets for whatever might come as we implement more automation or the integration of AI into the world of work. And going back to the contributions from last year, there was a bit of focus on capacity building, enhancing digital skills, raising awareness, so there are a few connections there. Digital public goods and digital public infrastructure, I skipped them because they were covered earlier. There were also quite a few references to these issues, including around open source when you made the contribution last year with the highlight that Renata also mentioned that it's not a bulletproof solution. We are not looking at open source as a solution to everything. There still needs to be safety issues there considered. Second objective and set of commitments around expanding inclusions and benefits from the digital economy for all. It's mostly around inclusion in the sense of, as you see on the first bullet point, open, fair, inclusive, non-discriminatory digital environment for all. Maybe not so much on the digital economy in the sense of what you, for instance, were saying last year, for example, around reducing barriers to digital trade and fostering a bit more this seamless, maybe, e-commerce, digital commerce, cross-border, but otherwise quite a lot around, for instance, encouraging cooperation to accelerate access to research capacity, to support digital entrepreneurship, and then a bunch of other things that might support at the end of the day this broader digital economy. Moving on to this broad chapter around human rights, internet governance, digital trust and safety, and information integrity. Human rights is also something you did highlight in your contribution. And what I like a lot, going to the contribution an hour ago, was this very first bullet point you're seeing on the screen. Policy requirements, whatever those might be, should not be modeled solely on existing, in this case it was European models, but I would say on existing Western models, and again highlighting the need for whatever is being proposed as a solution to reflect the realities and the needs of various communities around the world. And again, I like that a lot of the provisions in the Global Digital Compact, this current draft, do highlight this. Internet governance, this is a bit of interesting chapter in the Global Digital Compact. It goes back to the discussion quite many years ago about what do we actually mean by internet governance, and now we have been having an interesting conversation about the extent to which internet governance and digital governance are completely different terms, whether we can separate them from each other or not. But anyway, one of the main goals here is to promote this open, global, interoperable, and reliable internet, which is a bit of the terminology that we have been hearing and promoting for quite a while in the internet governance or digital governance space, depending on what term you want to use. A few provisions about the IGF, and then this introduction of avoiding the risk of internet fragmentation, which is good to include. Probably it would deserve a bit more of a clarity as to what do we mean by internet fragmentation at technical level, at policy level, and all these clarifications. And going back to what was in the contribution from last year, I also like this call for collaboration on a regional level on decisions, whatever decisions that are being made when it comes to regulating the digital space, and then looking at how language might be a barrier or not to this broader inclusion into digital governance. On trust and safety, there are quite a few calls on private companies, which I think do deserve a bit of attention. So if you go and read the document, pay attention to these things. Some of them are pretty interesting. For instance, this call on social media platforms to establish safe and secure reporting mechanisms for users to report potential violations. I think the question we could be having here is to what extent calls are actually going to drive change, but if we discuss about multi-stakeholderism, and there is also buying from the other actors into the whole Global Digital Compact, I guess this has a little more chances of actually also becoming some sort of a reality. Information integrity, this is indeed one of the major challenges of the digital space that we're facing today, and unfortunately we do not really have a very easy solution or actually no solution whatsoever right now. How do we deal with this very fast and widespread of misinformation? And it's very good that the Global Digital Compact is trying to tackle it through different set of commitments related to more training, developing of capacities at individual level to be able to critically interact with online content, and also the promotion of what is called here science-based information, a very interesting term, and this promotion of reliable and accurate information. And again, quite a few calls on social media platforms which are in some way the intermediaries in all of these discussions. Here as well, you were talking about the need for regional cooperation between both public and private actors, and I would expand that also international cooperation, which is really key if we want to try to even get near addressing this issue of misleading content. Data governance has its three different sections, one on data privacy and security, skipping it quickly, another one on data exchanges and standards that Renata covered quite in detail earlier, and the last one on data for development. And here's probably the most interesting element that might come to life if the GDC is approved as it looks now, is this potential work at the UNGA level towards a framework for international data governance. I've been having quite a few discussions with many of the small countries here in Geneva, and I don't feel that everyone is equally ready to contribute to this international debate on international data governance, but it will definitely be something interesting to keep an eye on, and not only keep an eye on, but also make sure there are contributions from a wide range of countries with different levels of development and readiness to contribute to these kind of debates. Finally, enhancing international governance of emerging technologies, including AI, and also covered this quite well. So I'll skip it. We have this idea of scientific panel on AI and emerging technology to help building this so-called scientific consensus of what are the risks around AI and emerging technologies that we might want to tackle through whatever governance mechanisms. And then probably more important, the idea of a global fund for AI and emerging technologies to support including capacity building and the development of localized data sets, localized AI models, and whatnot. We'll see how that goes. I guess it's a matter of seeing to what extent the Secretary General, if this is created, manages to attract the necessary support from relevant actors who are in a position to contribute funds to this global initiative. And last but not least, we have this follow-up and review mechanism that I'll skip because it doesn't look extremely easy to unpack right now, but as I'm showing this slide, I encourage you to take a look. There's a lot of roles and responsibilities on various UN agencies, on the Secretary General, and then there is this 2-year post-2-year high-level review at the UN General Assembly level. And then some work to be done also within the context of existing mechanisms, including the SIDS4 and the IGF. So these are also things that are still being discussed. I think, again, the key message would be to look into how to connect all these things together and make sure that the objectives we had in 2003, 2005, and also along the way are also still reflected in what we're trying to achieve moving forward, and also connecting with the agenda for sustainable development. I think I was longer than I planned, but I'll stop sharing my screen here and hoping we can still have a bit of time for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serena. You're a star. I think you very, very quickly and most effectively went through the GDC points and a particular feature which I have to say I didn't expect, but very, very much appreciated was your reference to the CTU coordinated inputs and giving information in terms of what aspects of it you saw being incorporated into the GDC so far. So that certainly has helped us a lot in terms of picking it up going forward. Dr. Dwan, before you mentioned about the regular multi-stakeholder updates and the possibility of working through your governments and so on to get further inputs into the whole process. Is there any other suggestion you might have related to
speak to governments? I think that's the main avenue right now, because it is at the point where it is an intergovernmental process and governments are negotiating. Actually, at the end of next week in New York, it's the first set of concrete negotiations. So if you really want to make sure your input passes through this process, speak with your government's representative who are then going to represent your country position in New York. I think that's the best avenue right now to make sure you try to have some sort of an input into the process.
I think we lost the Antigua team.
I was just wondering what's happening, so it's not on my end.
No. Maybe let's maybe I can jump in.
Yeah. Tracy, we're gonna contact them and see what's going on.
All right. So maybe
Hi. Hi all. Can you hear me?
Yes, Tamika, go ahead.
Yes. We're just sorting it out right now.
Okay, so could be with
Just
us
give us
couple minutes, so let's see if you get back on me.
2 minutes.
Okay, Tamika. Senior is back on.
Okay, I think we had a little glitch here.
We lost it there for a few seconds, Nigel.
Right. I realized that because the screen suddenly froze and I wasn't sure if it was us here or Serena, but clearly it was us here because the connection did go down for a short while. I was saying, Serena, that we very much appreciated your commentary on what aspects of the CTU coordinated contributions have been included into the GDC so far, and I was asking about possibilities of, in addition to what Dr. Dwan had mentioned before you, what possibilities there might still be apart from following the multi-stakeholder updates and working through your governments, if there's any other suggestion you might have for people to be able to make any input to the GDC development, even at this stage.
Again, repeating what I was just saying while you were disconnected, I think it's still through governments, since we are now at the level where it is an intergovernmental process and we have negotiations starting at the end of next week in New York. I think the best chance to actually have something reflected in these negotiations is to speak with governments and make your point as strong as possible. We're still having discussions here in Geneva in the context of the WSIS forum, and then there will be an IGF, but really the process is intergovernmental. So I would strongly encourage everyone to speak with governments and put forward your input there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We do have a little time to engage, and I see a hand up.
Right.
One of the attendees, is it Kurt Saverin? If you could just introduce yourself and make your intervention.
Yes, sorry, same mistake. I have about 3 screens and I accidentally raised my hand. Sorry about that.
All right, no problem. Thanks. I see Tracy Hackshaw. Maybe we go to Tracy.
Thanks, Nigel. Hi, Serena. So I have I guess the jackpot question. The IGF and the future of the IGF, meaning the United Nations Global IGF, given what the GDC is saying on the concept. So I know there's quite a lot of debate around this in terms of what the IGF is is currently doing and what it might evolve to. And then the GDC is saying, well, the IGF, yes, we support the IGF, but how about these other mechanisms that we would run out of, let's say, other, the New York process and so on. Any thoughts on how that is evolving given the commentary and the negotiations that are happening?
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, it is a bit of the elephant in the room, and it has been so for quite many years, not only in the context of the GDC, but again, going back to 2003, 2005, when we had the WSIS outcomes from which the IGF is actually emanating. If you have looked at the Tunis agenda, the paragraph outlining the mandate of the IGF is quite long, but for some reason, we seem to be focusing on only letter 1 of 10 letters in the mandate of the IGF, which is facilitate public discourse on matters related to public policy issues on internet governance. If we go a little down the line, for instance, there is this very interesting references about the ability of the IGF to look at emerging issues as they come up, which is everything we're discussing these days, and issue recommendation when appropriate, which I feel we need to talk a bit more about, also in the context of implementation of the Global Digital Compact. I think some of these discussions are accelerating a bit because, as you have also mentioned, some people are not particularly comfortable with the idea of just leaving the IGF deal with whatever we mean by internet governance, whereas everything else might be dealt with somewhere else. And I think this has also been reflected in the new version of the Global Digital Compact, where the references to the IGF have been changed a bit. And there is also this invitation for the IGF to come up with this particular track in which it will bring together people to discuss implementation of the GDC. I think there is still a wish for that part about the role of the IGF in implementation to be a bit stronger. And that's also a moment when governments who are advocating for the IGF can go and put forward, again, their wishes a bit more strongly maybe than before. I guess we don't necessarily, or we shouldn't have necessarily waited or go with this idea that a decision on what the IGF should be doing should only be made next year in the context of WSIS plus 20, but unfortunately this is where we are. And this is also one of the arguments that have been used by the co-facilitators when making reference to their referencing of the IGF, saying, well, we don't want to say too much about the IGF because it is up to WSIS review process next year to actually decide on it, which might be a bit forced. But bottom line, good news is that things have changed slightly between the previous version and the current one. And there is still room for improvements according to some views. So let's see what comes next. If you have a chance to talk to your government and push for something, please go ahead.
And a direct follow-up on that, the concept of internet governance versus so there's digital governance, AI governance, and so on. What are your thoughts on that, having seen what the GDC is trying to say? Because so they seem to be compartmentalizing the IGF for certain things, but here's some other areas we need to deal with, other governance areas we need to deal with that we will in fact look at. I don't want to say separately, but certainly complementarily, maybe that's the right way to phrase it. So the thinking that I'm sure some people have is, why have all of these structures and discussions and things to fly off in the world to be at 10 meetings a year discussing pieces of the puzzle? Why not put it in one bucket and let's have it out in this larger forum or summit or whatever you want to call it. Any thoughts on that and how the GDC negotiations are going to deal with that larger issue about what do we call the IGF and this concept of governance and internet governance, etc.?
Again, you're raising a very important and interesting point because we seem to use language very lightly these days. Unfortunately, we talk about data governance, we talk about content governance, we talk about AI governance, digital governance, internet governance, but then we don't really sit and take a step back and ask, okay, what are the differences between all these things? Who is dealing with what? Can we, as you say, can we all just try to bring them all together and have a bit of more cohesion, consistency, whatever words we want to use? One example I like to give whenever we talk, for instance, about the distinction between internet governance and digital governance, and whether the IGF is discussing only one or the other, is, okay, look at the agenda of the most recent Internet Governance Forum meeting and try to make a distinction. What is internet governance and what is digital governance? Can you make that very clear distinction? And then if you say, okay, we want the IGF to only deal with internet governance, but we want everyone else to do digital governance, at what point do you say, okay, we stop here because it's only internet governance and then everything else is digital? I mean, also in this world today, everything kind of goes over the classical TCP/IP protocol. So can we really differentiate all these things? I think we do, all of us discussing these things, we do need to try to take a step back and try to have more clarity in our discussions, and then going ahead and saying, okay, we should be discussing these issues here and addressing those issues there. Yeah, we do. I strongly think we do need a bit more clarity in our own conversation and making sure we these are so many things happening at the same time. It's kind of impossible for one single country to follow everything and also to have a meaningful contribution into all of this. So we are encouraging in it as much as possible countries with the same interest or with some sort of similar characteristic to try to join forces and come up with joint contributions, speak with one single voice in these discussions, like the EU is doing. We keep talking about, oh, how amazing the European Union is with the regulatory framework and whatnot. Yeah, because they do speak with one voice. You have the European Commission, they're representing everyone, and that's it. I'm not saying it's easy to replicate all of that, but if there is one thing indeed that smaller countries and developing countries can and should be doing is to try to speak a bit more with one voice as much as possible. I know there are differences between, countries, government priorities, capacities and whatnot, but I'm pretty sure there are issues on which you do have the same goals and the same objectives. So even on only those, you do speak with the same voice and you ensure this strong presence. Okay, this time it's this country. Next time the other country will go and speak for us. This sort of coordination will help. And I'm seeing this happening here in Geneva with the African Union. So I'm not using only the EU as an example. They have created this African Union Coordination Group on digital issues, so they are trying to keep a more active eye, if I can say that, on digital discussions in Geneva with this kind of rotation. So you go to the ITU and you follow this, you go to the WTO and you follow this, and then we meet every now and then and exchange opinions and see how we can have a stronger voice. So this kind of learning maybe from others and seeing how you can have this more coordinated approach, I think is the way to go. I hope that helps a bit.
Let me jump in at that point. I did see one more hand, Dr. Arlene Lang. Are you still wanting to take the floor?
I just didn't want to take up more time because we still have so much more to go.
Go ahead.
What has been learned from the development of the WMO's Unified Data Policy? Because my enterprise, the Weather and Climate Enterprise, is pretty much built on ICT. And so some of the discussion that was just asked about how do you have voices of the smaller countries be heard? In the development of that data policy, we did have discussions about what this unified data policy meant for low resource countries. But perhaps because the atmosphere knows no boundary, it was a lot easier to deal with that.
Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with this particular instrument, but I think you are raising a very important point. Are we looking at examples and lessons learned from other processes around data governance before we're trying to come up with something new? And what kind of lessons have we learned about exactly the capacity of all of the actors to contribute? And I'll also refer back to what I was saying earlier. In our discussions here with people in Geneva, we are getting messages from quite a few countries saying, yes, there is this call for a strong international data governance mechanism, but we feel we're not ready for this discussion because we do not have the capacities to, even know what we want with our own data governance at a national level. So then if we end up at an international negotiation table, it will be mostly others imposing their views on us, which is not necessarily what we might want from an international data framework, which is inclusive and whatnot. So I very much like your question, and I'll try to raise it here in Geneva as much as possible. What kind of lessons have we learned from more specific instruments on data governance, especially when it comes to involvement of everyone, basically? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I put something in the chat with a link to the WMO bulletin on the Unified Data Policy, if that might help.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lang. And let me say a very, very warm and appreciative thank you to Serena as well for this presentation and discussion. I think we've swept smoothly through the first part of the program, but before we go to break, we are asking for us to take a group photo. I think I wouldn't be forgiven if we forget or miss the opportunity. So let me please ask everyone to turn your cameras on for us to navigate a group photo. And my colleagues at the CT Secretariat would take care of that. Is that Shanae or is that Michelle?
No, it's me, Michelle. Thank you, Nigel, for taking care of this.
Yes.
Right. Are we going to have more persons turning on?
I'm not
Sherry,
sure.
Clyde, Lena. If not, I will proceed. So we can look directly into your camera, please. I'll take at least.
Your camera,
and Tracy is waving. So we can do 3 shots. One with us waving and
yes.
Not yet, on the cue.
Not yet, a straight one.
We'll take a serious shot for, well, not serious, but you can smile without a wave. All right, 1, 2, and now we can wave. All right. Let me just take another one. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, I think we are doing very well for time vis-a-vis our planned agenda. So we would take now a 15-minute comfort break. And after the break, we would proceed with the latter part of today's session, which would feature 2 panel discussions, hopefully building upon some of the themes you would have heard so far from today. I might not have mentioned that this second SIDS IGF is in two parts. I started talking about the first part today. And tomorrow, in the margins of the SIDS4 conference, we have a specific side event, which is only 90 minutes long, and we really would have only limited remote participation for that. But we would take any points coming from today's session into that one, which would be in person on site tomorrow. And essentially, we would conclude the overall second SIDS IGF at the in-person session tomorrow, right? Okay. I was saying a 15-minute comfort break. Just give me 1 second to clarify that. There might be a Okay, so I'm back. So really, it will be a comfort break rather than a coffee break. We'll just take a break for about 5 minutes, and then we'll continue with the program. So it is now 2:47 local time. So let's resume at 2:52 local time. So a short break. Thank you.
And can I ask my panelists, this is Tracy Hackshaw speaking, Clyde, Ariel, let me just get my list.
The comments that the informal comments we heard during the break and the time of day for different persons is the real challenge of running a SIDS IGF. You know, the time zone differences and I guess balancing the inconvenience with persons from all parts of the world. So this is why we felt, well, maybe with a SIDS conference going on, we could probably get many of us together in the same place and try to have a good discussion. And we are doing both. We're having this virtual session, and then tomorrow we'll also be having a bit of an in-person session with persons on the ground. And we'll summarize the results coming out of that. So we'll move on now to the first of two panels for today. And this would be moderated by Mr. Tracy Hackshaw. I mentioned the CTU Secretariat coordinating with the DC SIDS of the UN IGF. Well, Tracy is a co-coordinator of that DC SIDS coalition at the UN IGF, and he's been moderating this panel looking at enhancing digital resilience, and especially for environmental sustainability. So Tracy, I'll hand it over to you to
Thank you very much, Nigel. And just to use another phrase we use when we do consensus building. So I think this time challenges where we're all equally uncomfortable with the time. Yeah. Is that fair? My colleagues in Manila and you're equally uncomfortable. So I think that's fair. All right, so let's begin, and without further ado, because time is a bit against us. So 40 minutes, and let's see how tight we could keep this. So my name is Tracy Hackshaw. As Nigel said, I'm the co-coordinator of the DC SIDS, which is part of the UN IGF intersessional work. And I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, from the Caribbean, but I'm currently based in Switzerland. And I'm going to essentially, as I said during the bit of a break, just hand over to each of the our guests, our experts, to say a few words about themselves, and then you can then spend about maybe 3 to 4 minutes, I would suggest, speaking about the topic that is currently in front of us, and hopefully that will leave enough time for some discussion amongst ourselves and some questions from the audience. So to do that, I'll first turn to Dr. Arlene Lang from the CMO. Dr. Lang, please proceed.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say a big thank you to CTU for inviting me to participate in this panel. I'm from the Caribbean Meteorological Organization. We coordinate activities in weather, water, and climate across 16 English-speaking member states. So that's my perspective being presented here. The Weather and Climate Enterprise really provides a lot of information for the public good in terms of observations, exchange of observations internationally, numerical and climate prediction. And this is all governed by a WMO unified data policy. And the global information is then taken by the national Met services or hydromet services and targeted to the local conditions in terms of warnings, advisories, and products. But all of these things, including the delivery of weather information to ensure effective decision-making, requires reliable, secure, robust ICT systems. An example of this is shown here in a people-centered multi-hazard early warning system, where it's really important to have governance and institutional arrangements. And we see the importance also of digital resilience for all of the different pillars that are highlighted here, especially things like the data and information collection, hazard detection, and later on things like dissemination of information. We are looking here at the links with Target D of the Sendai framework, which aims to reduce disaster risk reduction through better critical infrastructure, and that includes weather and climate infrastructure. First, I will go through my presentation quickly, focusing on the different elements that you saw at the beginning. The importance of resilience of the observation network. We have the need for calibration of instruments and maintenance of instruments. That means trying to standardize And we will have also severe weather database that is held at CIMH and mirrored at the headquarters unit. And can I beg your forgiveness? Somebody's knocking at my door. I'm so sorry. I beg your...
Yes, feel free to answer that very urgent knock. Somebody seems to be very, want to see you urgently. So I think it's, I'll just fill some time quickly. So I think the question that I want some of you to consider when you're discussing this topic is what specific digital infrastructure investments do you think are most critical for SIDS to enhance environmental sustainability? So that is a question I think we want to address as part of our discussion. And also, as what is being described here, how can data-driven decision-making help SIDS balance economic development with environmental protection? So the whole issue of the digital decision-making needs to be looked at. And I see Dr. Leng is back, so that's filling some time.
I beg your pardon. Someone came from the lodging and was knocking on the door. So I had to go because they were pounding on the door, and I did not want that to be part of the discussion. I do ask your forgiveness and forbearance here. So I will pick up very quickly here to mention that part of what we try to do to ensure resilience of the observation networks is ensuring that they're mirrored sites for what are critical facilities, climate data and weather data. I'll move down to the next slide quickly. We also ensure that there's observation resilience by doing what the WMO calls a basic observation network, and that is being financed through a systematic observation financing facility to ensure that we're not just focusing on projects that are short-lived, but that there's a sustainability of the basic network for the public good. And there's there's also testing of the quality and timeliness of the data. And this is a snapshot of yesterday afternoon showing that everything was green except for one station in Montserrat. And the other way we're assuring this resilience is all through our operational radar working group. And we have, through that group, done things like ensured lessons learned for data archiving, retrieval, dissemination, and so on. One of the challenges that we're facing because of the growth in international mobile telecommunication is the degradation in the ability to use the Earth observation network from the satellite perspective because of the encroachment on the frequencies that the Earth is emitting at. And that's also being encroached on by other kinds of technology. One of the most critical areas that we're concerned about is sea surface temperature. And because we are tiny islands with vast ocean and tropical cyclones are born over the ocean where the temperature is above 26 Celsius. So we need to always be able to see the ocean, and we can only do that from satellite. We are addressing this through things like this training workshop that we held in February with the cooperation of the CTU. Thank you very much. And we brought together regulators, Met Services, universities, civil defense, and other stakeholders. We now exchange our data through the internet, through satellite, through the system called the Global Telecommunications System. And this is 24-hour international data exchange to safeguard lives and property, governed again by this unified data policy. But we also have to be very careful of attacks. And we recently had within the Caribbean last year, one of our radar systems was hacked, and it took a couple of months for that to come back online. So there needs to be robust ICT security measures, not only for meteorology, but the systems are also used for things like tsunami because they're 24-hour operations. We're transitioning to a new thing called the WMO information system. And here we're also pioneering this idea of this global broker, global cache, where the data consumer can go out and seek the information. And we have, with the support of the WMO, a node for the Caribbean since October. In terms of the numerical weather prediction, we have this large strange-looking creature in the depiction, but it really is showing how we go from observations to assimilating the data, getting information to specialized users and having them give us feedback to ensure that we're providing what they need as part of the processing and prediction system. And at the local level, the global information is then taken down and targeted to what is needed by national stakeholders. And here we're really ensuring that we're talking about a nationalized institutional mechanism. And the example shown here is from Turks and Caicos, where the Met Service and the Disaster Office together co-developed, co-produced, co-designed, and then delivered the information. The delivery of information is really important here to note that the Common Alerting Protocol is what has been agreed to by the WMO and others. And here there's an alignment with the mobile cell broadcast, and that is key for public alerting, which has also the potential for geographic targeting, so we don't false alarm too many people and lose trust in our systems. And I show another example of a slow onset event, which is the AgroMet kind of monthly bulletins that are given out as well. And I'll show one final example. This is the climate services and related applications. And this is being led by the CIMH on behalf of the CMO. And this is targeting specific climate sensitive areas of health, water, agriculture, and involves lots of ICT products. So I'll end with this slide showing that all of these things are interconnected: the hydromet services, the environmental sustainability, and digital resilience, because of the desire to have environmental sustainability requiring high quality data that is built on secure and robust ICT. But there's also the consideration that the ICT also needs to be informed by weather and climate intelligence so that they're aware of the impacts of different kinds of hazards on ICT system integrity. Thank you so much for your patience with me, and I do apologize for having to take that break.
That's okay, Dr. Wang. Thank you so much for that very enlightening presentation. I was actually quite impressed at the amount of technology that the CMO uses. It's something that I think not many of us are aware of, that the meteorological organizations around the world, especially, I guess in this case, a CMO, uses a lot of technology and especially a lot of data to generate these models, and really appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you so much, Dr. Leng. I think we'll move straight on now to Mr. Mohabir from the Indian Ocean Commission Secretariat. Mr. Mohabir is, I believe, based in Mauritius, if I'm not mistaken. So one of, I think, our first participant from the Indian Ocean today. So over to you, Mr. Mohabir. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Do you see the screen, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So my presentation on the specific theme, which is leveraging digital solution for environmental sustainability, there are two key messages I'm trying to send. First is that there is what I believe is the main prerequisite on which we should work, all the SIDS. And then some examples of the application. And because I don't have much time, sorry, excuse me, I will go very quickly on each of them. This is just a map of the world now. You know, it has changed a lot. From what you see here, there were cables laid from one point to other from the different countries. It has changed now to a sort of a interconnected world web everywhere. It's not something that is new. We all know this. But then what is very important is that the digital has entered in our lives, whether it is economic, social, environmental, anything you do, private sector, public sector, NGOs, whatever you do. And we're talking not of information which we will get eventually. We are talking about practical information that we should get, and we are thinking and trying to work on seconds. When we are saying now, it's really now. Lots of information to transmit, lots of processing to be done. And the future, you've been working on that, everyone. Now, there are some things on which we SIDS have to work on is how we can get the link to the rest of the world, but not the country, but the end user. And it was very well put by the predecessor from WMO about why everyone should be able to get access to this information. I won't get into the details of the very important factors which are very key for the SIDS for internet penetration and digitalization. Now, I would like to stress on this point. It's not just to have the internet, but also work on capacity, a level of speed, of latency, of service, quality service level, of reliability, and hence redundancy of alternative routes so that no operation will stop anytime when you are watching a film. It should not stop at some period. But more importantly, here, I think there is less of work that has been done, is in fact to try to see to it that there's lots of competition, that the price is closer to cost, and services which we like, innovation, etc., etc. Now, I would like to give one example on which we worked at in our region. What we saw is that practically the same operator was providing a broadband internet connectivity. And there are some principles on which we worked, which are mentioned here. Again, I won't go in each of them, but very important to be working on the democratization of access to international broadband. If SIDS do not focus on these principles at each SIDS level, then whatever we can talk at international level, we won't go far. And this is what we did. We started in 2014. We did quite a number of processes, feasibility studies, all sorts of work, business plans, the finance, etc. And eventually we got, operators from the region to come and respond to our call. We signed an SPV together with them, and then we ensured that these principles that I mentioned earlier are respected and in the SPV, and then we got 6 operators to agree, and then we went into the establishment of a Metis cable, and that cable is operated now in an open access principle. It has got investments from the operators themselves. No one is a dominant operator, etc., etc. And these are just some pictures of the laying of the cable that was done. These are the precise pictures, and these are the work to link the cable to the landing stations. And in 2020, we got the links to be operationalized. And if you look at this map, you can see that in blue, Mauritius, Réunion, Madagascar, etc. We went to South Africa, where you have the whole highway, international highway, and then the SIDS, the small islands, and the small economies were connected to the international broad highway. Now, some examples of applications. SIDS have large, vast economic exclusive zones, and all of the SIDS are working towards sustainable development, but on blue economy. But they also are suffering from many challenges, like traffic of drugs, arms, human trafficking, etc., etc. Now, we have developed an architecture for maritime security, and these are the green area is where we jointly coordinate operations at sea. In other words, we pool, assets from the countries, but then we, in fact, in the middle 26 north and 76 east to 20 east and 37 south, this is an area where we try to monitor the movement of all the vessels in that area. And then in the green dotted lines, we try to see to it that there are operations at sea. So in other words, if there is a vessel which is doing some IU fishing in one country, and they just leave either the one country, go in another one, we can just go and check them, and in another country, we can stop them. Now, why I'm just showing that is because if the national centers and the regional centers do not work together, and that they are not connected, and the whole system is not digitalized, it won't work. So it is even in that area of ensuring that the SIDS are able to ensure a full surveillance and control of their vast maritime zones, which I believe very few SIDS are able to do, if not none of them. And these are the resources that are, in the vast EEZs of the SIDS. Now, what we see is that the maritime incidents are increasing with time, but these are just, I believe, just the tip of the iceberg. And for example, just an application, we can see the movement of the vessels. And hence, if we can see the movement of the vessel, then we can avoid, catastrophes that happen, for example, like Wakashu. Like another one, for example, on wildlife smuggling, we know where they're operating. And when we see particular vessels going here and there, we analyze their movements and we can, identify them. And we can see also where they're going. One last example and then I'll end here, is, for example, you get an area, this is called the Saya de Malha area, which is a joint continental shelf owned by, the EEZ shared by Mauritius and Seychelles. There are very special creatures like the pygmy blue whales breed. The water is not deep, but the banks are very nutritious. And it is, it is supporting the world's largest seagrass meadow. Apparently, it absorbs even more CO2 than the Amazon forest. There are studies that are shown, and that these are very critical feeding grounds for. Now, what we did is that for a few months, we just monitored the vessels' activities there. And what we found is that there are these 14 different types of contraventions that vessels do, which in fact shows us, these contraventions are contraventions that are regulations not being observed by vessels, IMO regulations not being observed by vessels, and each of them, are subject to, an inspection by countries. Now, we found just in a few months, we found around at least 70 vessels like this. What I'm trying to say is that with digitalization and the internet, with all this enable us to, see how SIDS can better manage and control all the actions in the EEZs. I just went maybe too quickly because of the limitations of time, but I wanted to again summarize on 2 points. First, there is a prerequisite, and the prerequisite is that there should be some conditions and some principles within which ICT and IT are operating at national level in the SIDS. And secondly, there are several examples of what we could do, and I think that the SIDS should be focusing also on how they can use digitalization and internet and broadband connectivity to collectively, control and do a good surveillance of their very large economic exclusion zone. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohabir, and that is a very fascinating presentation. I was not even aware of the potential challenges that are faced in that part of the world by these, threat actors, these physical threat actors, and utilizing technology to map and to monitor these challenges is something that I'm wondering if other regions do the same, because this clearly is another aspect of environmental sustainability and resilience that we need to look into very carefully, especially as you mentioned. I heard you mention that that particular area within the Indian Ocean that absorbs more CO2 than the Amazon rainforest, which I was not even aware of. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and giving us that level of detail. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohabir. I will now move on to my colleague from PNG in the house, Mr. Russell Waruba, my colleague from the GAC and the ICANN setting. And Russell, please introduce yourself and go ahead and to give your 3 to 4 minute presentation. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Tracy. thank you, Nigel, and all our good team at the CTU, and for the amazing job you guys are doing, and for organizing our SIDS IGF virtual meeting, and to all my esteemed colleagues. My esteemed predecessor laid a very interesting background, and I just want to just give some use cases of what we're doing, and then towards the end draw out some conclusions on where we are in terms of what we're doing in the Pacific, and especially in my country, in Papua New Guinea. My apologies, I don't have a presentation. I'm in Singapore at the moment, and I woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning, so it's right. But I just want to just say that I'm currently here with my esteemed permanent secretary from Trinidad and Tobago. We are attending a forum on small states, and many of the points that have been raised here are sort of very similar. And I think there's a lot of synergy here, which we can draw from. And I just want to share a few of those learnings that I've heard here, and the sort of applications we have done and what we're thinking of doing back home. One of the things that I found very interesting was that although we may not have, population-wise, the big numbers like China or India, we as small states have more votes in the UN. If we have good relationships and good frameworks of governance around those cutting areas, like open data flows, cross-border data flows, if we have standards and frameworks by which ICT and digital sort of exist, we can leverage that and get across a lot more in terms of our national and regional development. I found it very insightful in my engagements over the last few days, especially when it came to AI, which our esteemed envoy from the UN covered that as well. So in terms of Papua New Guinea, we are sort of in our version 1 of our digital transformation journey. We are trying to have a framework around how we approach digitalization of government services to our citizens, and having an agile approach to the development of services. And you must have heard of the tragedy that happened over the last week or so on our people of Enga. Then over 3,000 people died in this village because of the landslide. So it's a typical example of a country that is rugged terrain, and our disaster office is really struggling. The coherence between the disaster office and the meteorology office, the National Weather Service, having the systems being interoperable has been one of our challenges since we started our digital journey. At the moment, we have very basic telemetry monitoring that happens, and it's mainly at the volcanoes, because we had the Pacific Ring of Fire, and it's just passing telemetry over 3 or 4G back to a sensor management, and then it passes it over. And then much of the work, we have yet to come to a level, I would imagine, as Dr. Lang and what you're doing in the Caribbean. So that's something that I found very insightful in this presentation. So it came across to me very clearly that within the region, disaster and resilience, it's a very key consideration in all our Pacific Island engagement. So what we did was last year we came together as Pacific Island nations in Papua New Guinea around August, and we had a Pacific ICT Ministers Dialogue, and what it allowed was that for about 5 years or so, the group has not become a real it's been a bit dormant, if I can put it, because in the Pacific we have the Pacific Island Forum countries, and then we have the Secretariat manages that, and then we have it has to be a working group of the leaders meeting. So ICT was missing out, and we didn't get good coordination across the region. So we are aiming for that. So we have a senior officials working group, which Papua New Guinea is the chair, and we are putting that as one of our main environmental readiness and resilience, especially using ICT. Our colleagues from Vanuatu have the submarine cable monitoring, especially because the tectonic plates that sits between them and Australia and New Caledonia is moving by 12 centimeters every year. So they are struggling on how they do monitoring, but you can't monitoring because the French will not allow New Caledonia to engage in that. So these are the geopolitics that come into this. So that's something that we are working through our action plan on how we can get the whole country and the whole region to work together. One of the developments that has happened in relation to submarine cables was what I shared in our chat group earlier this month, around mid-month. We had our submarine cable operator, PNG Data Co, signed an innovative parametric insurance policy to provide rapid payouts with this Pacific Catastrophic Risk Insurance Company. It hasn't been done in the world, first time ever that such a product exists. So Data Co, if it has a cable break because of the high geomorphological and volcanic activity, especially resulting in earthquake, that's covered under this product, and it allows Data Co to get support from the cable operators. So the moment there's a cut, and once there's signal loss on the monitoring by the telco, it sparks an alarm on the telemetry, and then it prompts management to make a decision that triggers the because in sub cables, the moment you call them and the ship turns around, that's when they start billing you to come to fix that cable. So I remember when I was working with telecom about 12, 15 years ago, you could spend for about a month, work on fixing a cable up easily up to $2 million to fix that. So that's the amount of cost it is for a cable operator within the region to operate. And it has to be a state-owned enterprise for us, and you have to factor that into your sort of pricing model so that you at least have some good feedback or some good returns on such an investment. So resilience, while it's technical, it is a bit of finance that you have to build into how you operate. So it's the first of its kind. The link is there. Please go and see. And if there's something that our colleagues from the Caribbean would like to consider, it's there. Hasn't been done before, but we were the first ones who started that. We are in touch with the Australian government. They're very keen to put in a third cable, and it's a Google cable. So Data Co is in talk with them to make sure that we have a versatility in terms of our uplink. We have around 10 million people in country, and most people are in the rural areas, and that's where the benefits of a cable landing there. But then we have the transmission and the last mile. We are having challenge trying to get Starlink into the country because of our legacy regulatory legislation. So what happened was all our telcos went to government and they said, hey, listen, if you bring in Starlink, this is how much are we going to get dropped in our revenue and hence taxes to government. So the government, okay, let's just sit on this. Let's do public consultation on Starlink. But as the policy arm of government, and we've been advising the ministry to just go ahead. A lot of democratization. In Australia, for instance, the National Broadband Network Company, they're going to retire all their Ka band satellites, and they're going Starlink. And it just opens up many possibilities for other things that you can do, especially in terms of monitoring the environment and all the use cases that come out with it. So it really accelerates digital transformation within the economy to have those low Earth orbit. So it will be very interesting how our regulator formulates over the next few months. The approach we are taking is that we're going to have an agent in the country, and then that facilitates. So we'll see how that one spans out over the next few months. So all in all, the government's role is to harness technology for good, and I think that's the key. That's the key area that as governments, AI poses a lot of risk, especially. So they did a bit of survey, and what they found is that countries that are advanced or developed usually prefer regulation over innovation because of the level of investment they've made in what they have. But small states like us, we want the innovation. And of course, you need overarching policies and frameworks that guide. And that's the sort of main takeaway over the last few days for us. Regulatory frameworks are very important. And technology changes so fast. So for large capital investment, you can do it, but it's the overlay technologies that you need good, solid frameworks around those. I think in terms of cross-border data flows, it's become very important. It allows finances. When you pay with your credit card, your data flows across different jurisdictions. You need to ensure that there are solid frameworks. So my point earlier was that a country like India, India has just overtaken to be the largest in the population in the world now. So they can negotiate with Google, they can negotiate with Microsoft because they have the volume. But that doesn't work for small states like us because we don't have the volume to bring in country so that you can localize data as one means of data sovereignty when you're dealing with personal data. So these issues are so real. But what we as small nations can do is that together we can go to the UN and have vote on certain frameworks, certain areas which we can come together and vote on, and we have the numbers. India only has one vote, with due respect to India or China for that matter. So this is some ways which we as a small island development state can be smarter in how we approach bigger forums on how we put our concerns forward. I think in terms of policy reforms,
I think we do have to wrap this. Time is very short. So
sure, yeah. No, thank you very much, Tracy. So I think there's a lot I can say, but I just wanted to just go through that, and happy to take questions. Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Nigel.
It sounds like you are thinking quite clearly, even though you got up on the wrong side of the bed. And I do want to share your condolences to your colleagues in PNG who lost their lives. 3,000 people is no small amount to sneeze at, and just in a moment, people losing their lives. That is horrific. So we do our thoughts and prayers go out to the PNG people and all of the families who've lost loved ones. All right. Thank you very much. Next up, I do have Pua Hunter from Cook Islands. Pua, if you're still there, perhaps you could introduce yourself and give a 3 to 4 minute intervention on this topic. Pua, over to you. Thanks, Russell.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to CTU, the amazing team from CTU for organizing this site event. I'll be very brief. My name is Pua Hunter, and I'm proud to be representing the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, specifically from the Pacific Hub. And I also want to register that I continue to provide ICT support to the government of the Cook Islands until they find a replacement for my former position as ICT director. So my views are generally representing of my dual roles. I actually want to acknowledge the previous speakers, Tupo, Hugo, Renata, and Serena. They eloquently articulated their individual positions towards today's agenda, which actually changed my intervention for the day. In particular, Hugo mentioned that ICT have changed the way we operate, the way we live, and how we engage in society. Basically, we live and breathe technology and digital engagement in many things we do now. So the value of technology to provide data sets that can be used and accessed to provide more and timely information to assist with our processes is actually very critical and important. However, we also have challenges. Us in SIDS face so many challenges. Things like enabling tools, human capability, which a lot of you mentioned, and also resource availability. For us in the Cook Islands, we have concerns about the potential impact of digital technology on traditional cultural practices, and the environment, as well as the risk of increased social isolation and addiction to technology. I quoted this from the Cook Islands National Digital Strategy, where the vision states, a digitally empowered and inclusive Cook Islands where technology enhances all lives, fosters innovation, drives economic growth and prosperity, improves social services, and protects our unique culture and environment while building a shared identity for our island home. This may appear long for a vision, but it actually captures a lot of the substance of what our previous speakers stated. For me, this is encouraging from a very small country in the small island state, where the vision was actually developed by our stakeholders from government and from the public sector, from academia, and from our civil society. Just on some basic sharing of what we're doing in the digital space, we're using digital monitoring tools to monitor water levels on each island to predict the onset of a drought. There's also incorporated weather monitoring application systems within our I'm sorry, I can't put on my video. Within our weather station, and also from the agricultural sector, there's a proposal to deliver training for farmers to use an app to order their agricultural needs online, as well as to sell their goods online. Unfortunately, these efforts and many more being rolled out in the country are being delivered individually and therefore operating in silos. I'm optimistic, however, that we can solve this and we can, because right now we have the necessary policies and strategies that have been endorsed to ensure that these developments are interconnected. Anyway, despite the challenges, digital transformation is an area that will continue to develop and evolve, and we in the SIDS will continue to pursue to improve our livelihood and that of our future generation, while ensuring the protection and security of our digital developments and existence. We can continue to speak to our government for our efforts to be recognized, but in parallel, we still need to actively and perhaps aggressively pursue our combined efforts as SIDS. Finally, and equally important, it is we need to be active, our active commitment and coordination to address all levels of security of our data and information as well as our communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pua. And thank you for your intervention from the perspective of the GFCE. And I would also venture from the Cook Islands as well. And yeah, I think that your observations are spot on in terms of resilience and environmental sustainability and what we can do as SIDS to treat with the issue and the challenges that we face. Thank you very much. And please do stand by for any questions that may come on this, especially from the GFCE standpoint. So in wrapping up our initial interventions, I know time is very short. I'm going to ask our colleague, Dr. Clyde Hutchinson, last but certainly no means least, from the Asian Development Bank to weigh in on the topic. And Dr. Hutchinson, please introduce yourself and please remember you have 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to be very quick, so you'll be happy, Tracy. First of all, I would like to echo Tracy's condolences to PNG. PNG's close to our heart here in K-Hub because many of my colleagues have worked there on the field. So again, we're very sorry to see the news coming from PNG this week. My name is Clyde Hutchison. My role is technical specialist in a newly formed hub here in the ADB, which is the ADB Korean Climate Technology Hub. And my role is really to help with the matchmaking of technologies around climate change and making the art of the possible available for today, because a lot of the topics which were covered were the things which we are looking really to promote and really focus on how do we use ICT for better decision making. We're very keen on developing early warning systems, so I was really happy to see Arlene's talk because weather is really crucially important and the communication of weather. We're also looking at improving traffic and the communication with traffic because across the Asian Pacific, someone dies on the road every 72 seconds. So if we can use ICT to improve connectivity, but also helping to make roads across the region safer is better. Also, we see ICT as an opportunity for better planning through digital twins, because now we're at a stage where a lot of the technology which previously were inaccessible for many small nations is now accessible and able to be implementable. So one of the things which we're very keen to promote is that there's a lot of things which can be implementable easily, but it does require having the skills and the talent available in the local regions. And I think finally, I was happy to see Russell mention parametric insurance. We feel parametric insurance is something which is really crucial in the region, but also there's opportunities within ICT. We're seeing the emergence of blue and also carbon bonds as a way of potentially financing projects. But obviously this will require measurement, reporting and verification tools which are going to be essential. We're using satellite technologies to be able to measure both carbon and blue carbon as we're looking to the future. So I'm here to help anybody who wants to discuss projects or would like to be matchmade with technology. We're here to help and also help explain various options which are available for immediate implementation within the member states. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hutchinson, and thank you as well for being very brief. Thank you for that intervention. Because we do have a question already. Maybe I can ask, I'm not sure if Mr. Rowe can open his mic. Can you open your mic? I'm not sure if that's possible. If not, I will read out your question. I'm going to pause, see if you can open your mic. I don't think so, because I don't think you may have the ability to do so. I doubt. So I'm going to ask the question on your behalf. It's actually in the chat. He'd asked in the Q&A box as well. I did say the panelists may not be equipped to answer this particular question because it's somewhat related, but it's not on the same topic. But he's asking if there's anyone in this panel, or maybe even otherwise, who can point him to a small island developing state that has a digital transformation tax credit program. I should say a successful program. Maybe that's the correct way to phrase it. He'd like to have a look at a successful model legislation for such a program. And if so, can you point him in the right direction? So a digital transformation tax credit program. And again, I know this may not be up everyone's alley in the panel, but if anyone does know, please feel free to say now, and maybe I can ask, waiting to see if anyone wants to weigh in on this. I see, let's now just double check. Who's raised their hand?
Russell.
Yes, Russell. That's Russell. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. The short answer is we don't, but we've had in terms of we have a lovely building in Mosby that's built by Oil Search, and that was through a tax credit scheme as a physical infrastructure. But we would love to see something that we could do for digital transformation. And I see it would have to come from the industry in that regard. So I think it's a really good point for us to look into. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just point, Mr. Rowe, in the chat, there's some, and in the Q&A box, I think there's some feedback coming in. I see Carol Roach, who is the United Nations IGF MAG Chair. Thank you for joining us, Carol. Very privileged to have you here with us. She's also from the Bahamas. She's a senior government official, so she may be able to also provide some insight. So look at her questions in the chat. I saw Dr. Hutchinson weighing in as well in the Q&A. So maybe you can take a look at that while we see if there are any other questions coming in as we look to close the panel. I did pose a few questions at the start, but I know the time has run out.
Tracy, just a quick question. The one about the tax credit seemed to have been from Dennis Augustine rather than Devon Rowe.
All right, sorry. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know if maybe you give Devon one last chance to try to intervene. I'm seeing a mic there. Yes, Devon?
Great.
Thanks. I was just saying that Jamaica may have some tax arrangements that consider either concession or some sort of tax accommodation, because they revised their tax arrangements in the last 10 years, and they would have merged a number of legislation into one where there is some sort of fiscal arrangements to support new initiatives. So that could be something that could be looked at. I'm not quite sure because I left there many years ago, but I knew at the time there was a revision to the tax arrangements to seek to accommodate new types of investments. So I'll stop here, and thank you very much for the opportunity to say a very brief word. And thanks to all the presenters as well for their wonderful presentations.
Thank you very much, Devon Rowe, for your intervention as well. I noticed there's some action in the chat. Dr. Hutchinson is also weighing in on as well. Are there any further questions on this topic? As I said, time unfortunately has run out on us. I don't want it to extend it any further and infiltrate the other panels. But just one last call for any further interventions.
No more hands at present.
All right. So with that, I'd like to thank all of the panelists and presenters who have come to us today and lent their expertise. And please feel free to review the recording of this session for the very, very enlightening information that was presented. And I'm certain that your presentations, where there were slides, would also be shared by the CTU, who will actually post it up on their event page in very short order. So I know some people will ask for the slides, especially of the Mr. Mohabir and Dr. Lang. We'd love to see if you could share that and people can have a look at that in their leisure, on their time. Maybe pose some questions to you as well. So that, Nigel, I'll toss back to you. Thank you very much all. And very excellent panel and very excellent information shared. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I think we're moving along well. We are on to our final panel of the day now. And I will hand this over to Ms. Maureen Hilliard, who will be the moderator. Maureen is actually another co-coordinator of the DC SIDS program. And she's also a former chair of the ALAC within the ICANN hierarchy. That's the at-large advisory committee of ICANN, and a former Pacific board chair and .Asia board director coming at present. And she's also the incoming Internet Society board director, and incoming Internet Society board director in the Pacific. So Maureen, over to you to coordinate this panel on digital inclusion for prosperity. Looking forward and making things happen. Over to you, Maureen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nigel, for that lovely introduction. Sorry, clearing my throat here. One of the disadvantages of being at the end of the program is that most of the earlier speakers have raised a lot of what has been said about our topic. Right. But I have every confidence in my panelists, to be able to add to the current conversations, especially as we're going to be focusing on the services that regional organisations are providing our small islands to support the needs of our internet end users. I really like the definition of the SIDS acronym that Eso and Ugo it contributed to earlier, the Smart Island Digital States, which is particularly relevant to this, to our current era of digital transformation. So one of the important challenges for governments and private sector organisations is that we want to discuss in our session today is how we might bridge the digital divide to ensure, as Renata raised earlier, that everyone can afford and can access the tools that they need to ensure their digital participation. And that means too that they can experience the full potential of the internet. So today we have 4 speakers, but 3 of them are actually sort of like present, in person online, who can address this important topic for internet users from our small islands from the perspective of their regional organisations. And I'd like to give the floor to our speakers for about 5 minutes each and then allow for 10 minutes at the end for some discussion on any questions that may be raised in the chat or, then we can get to them at the end. But our first, just to quickly go through our speaker list, we first have Teresa Orejova, who is currently the Outreach Manager for the Global Forum of Cyber Expertise, which Pua mentioned earlier. And Teresa is based near Geneva, which is where many of us will have met her when she was with the Diplo Foundation. And I know that Tracy and I were amongst, got our first introduction to internet governance through Diplo. And Teresa's always been a very strong supporter of the work that we've been doing in the DC SIDS. And we've been very grateful for that support and to have her on our team today. We also have Cherie Langakali, who originally from Fiji and now based with her family in New Zealand. She's recently taken over as the Pacific Manager for NetSafe, which you will hear about. And Cherie was also a former chair of the PEC-ISOC board and also a former manager of the Pacific Hub of the GFCE. So there's another connection there as well. very qualified for her current role. We also have Sirai Tevita, who is from Samoa, and she is the current chair of the PKSOC board. And Sarai is the ICT director of the National University of Samoa and also the president of the Samoan Information Technology Association, but more from Sarai soon. We were to have another guest, Mahendranath Baskopal from Mauritius, but he's having some issues with connectivity. But he was prepared for this inevitability. So he has a video which we will show later in our session. But Mahendranath is actually the Secretary General of the HALI movement, which is a coalition of charitable organisations that protect the interests of children and their families in Mauritius. And he's also a director of the Mauritius and Indian Ocean States IGF. So we really want to actually, it's really important that we actually have contributions from the Caribbean, the Pacific, and the African community, IGF communities as part of this SIDS event today. So I think we'll start off our conversation with the first question, which is digital inclusion is all about creating a level playing field for everyone using the internet. So to summarise for each of you, what would be your organisation's top 2 key enablers to support a level playing field for internet users on our small islands? Starting off with Teresa.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Everybody, it's good to be here with many friends, I can say. Yes, to answer your questions for the GFC, the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, it's very important to also be participating in events like this, like the Small Islands, the Small Island States IGF. This is well past my bedtime, so that confirms that I find it worthwhile to be here with you tonight. And why is that? That is because the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, we have mentioned that we have the hubs, and I'll get back to it in a minute, but we have really tried to change our approach to cyber capacity building from this era of very supply-driven approach to, telling countries what they need to a more demand-driven approach. That's quite some fancy words, but what it actually means is that we want the actual countries to be the owners of their capacity building future, shaping the priorities and be in the driving seat. And in this logics, about 2-3 years ago, the GFC really started trying to materialize this idea by establishing regional hubs. Which we currently have in various formats and shapes and different kind of stuffing and similar aspects in 4 regions. One of them is the Pacific Islands. The second, also heavily dominated, of course, by the SIDS agenda, the Americas and the Caribbean. Obviously, also Africa and Southeast Asia. So in all these regions, we have hubs with local people, local staff, local experts who really understand the situation, who really have, extensive network, and who can then help us shape how capacity building in the field of cybersecurity unfolds on the global level. So, part of your question, Maureen, was about this creating of this level playing field. Sorry. So this is what I actually meant by the previous points. Yes, that it is kind of changing the dynamics by having the countries themselves to shape it. This is also where we try to kind of come in as the GFC, because one problem that we have seen in digital development, cyber capacity building, is that there is tremendous duplication of efforts, which obviously means much less efficiency, much less efficacy, much smaller impact, and not very smart use of resources, which obviously are needed, but also not bottomless. So this is where we try to connect the various dots among the hubs the global developments, and then in this respect, hopefully, make some contribution and bring some difference. By collecting the information, and having a good overview of who does what, in all of these regions, I would also like to stress that we focus quite extensively on trying to align the efforts of the donors themselves, because also on this end is there quite insufficient coordination, which can always be improved. So that is very briefly, answer to your question, Maureen, of what the GFC, the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, can do in this respect: cybersecurity, digital development, digital inclusion. Over to you.
Thank you, Teresa. Yes, I think that think global and go local is a very sort of like important theme for us. And I guess, Shuri, you're actually looking at a national sort of like an organization working on a national perspective now. So what is your organization sort of like doing?
Well, good morning, Maureen. Kiara Golovinaka, everybody. As Maureen has mentioned, I am with NetSafe New Zealand, and NetSafe is in fact, the approved agency for the digital, it's called Harmful Digital Communications Act of New Zealand. And so NetSafe is, its biggest aim is helping the people of New Zealand to create safer and positive online spaces. And to answer your question about how it's being inclusive, NetSafe recently received funding from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade New Zealand for a project to take materials and campaigns and awareness campaigns to 5 Pacific Island countries. Now, these were Samoa, Cook Islands, Niue, Tokelau, and Vanuatu. And in order to make it more inclusive, NetSafe is also looking at extending this to the other Pacific Island countries. And so we're working on making sure, like Teresa had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of duplication of efforts. There's a lot of, because it's a very small space and there's a lot of things that are happening. Our aim when we first started this project was to gather fellows from these Pacific Island countries and work with them to find out what is already there, so that we're not taking something and repeating it and duplicating it all over again. And then sitting down and working with the needs of of the Pacific Island countries, what exactly where they are at and what the Pacific Island countries are doing and where those gaps are. And so identifying those gaps and working in partnership with these Pacific Island countries. Having this specific manager role was a new role. It was created by NetSafe, and I was hired for this role, being a Pacific Island country, from the Pacific Island countries and being aware of what's already happening on the ground. And you asked for 2. So the other thing that NetSafe is working on is we're creating content for the elderly, because the most vulnerable people in the society are our children and our elderly. And we've had a number of cases where, our grandparents and our mothers and grandfathers are clicking on a link and all their money is taken away. And so, working with the elderly, also in the context of the Pacific, looking to create materials for the elderly in our societies in the Pacific as well as New Zealand.
Great. Thanks, Shuri. So this sort of leads straight into yours. I mean, with all the work that is actually being happening in the region with Teresa and Shuri, I mean, PICOSOC has a very important coordination role. So how do you see that PICOSOC can be involved in this? You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. Talofa from Samoa. Good morning, all. Good evening, good afternoon. Yes, thank you for the question. According to the PICOSOC, I'll answer from the PICOSOC perspective first before I move to the National University, where I'm the ICT director there. Yes, with the PICOSOC, as you know, that we all in the PICOSOC, we're trying our best to have the platform for all our experts and the Pacific people with IT backgrounds and IT expertise to come and share their successful stories. Hence, we have our PAC IGF as the annual event And with a theme, we have selected themes every year. So for this year, we're going to have another PEC IGF at Wellington, co-located with APNIC 58. Last year, we had one at Brisbane. So the lesson learned from those, from the previous PEC IGF will be improved for the next PEC IGF. The other thing that the PKI Soccer is doing with promoting the digital inclusion is to continually use our mailing list. If you see that sometimes it's being silent and sometimes it's being very busy due to interesting matters that our people, they try to share. And it's very interesting to see other parts of the Pacific Islands, they already expose things that other Pacific Islands not doing it. Example with the existing of the Starlink. Other Pacific Island countries, they're not accepting Starlink yet. For example, Samoa, they will come in 2025 because there were some issues before during this year. So now, 2025, the Starlink will come to Samoa. But I've seen other Pacific countries like Tonga to already there. Vanuatu, I think discussion with their legislation, it's passed, so the Starlink is there. So having that infrastructure in place, having the networking connectivity in place will boost the internet and digital inclusion and give opportunity to entrepreneurs to sell their products online because we have their infrastructure. Coming back to the National University of Samoa, with the question you proposed, Maureen, it's very important to see, the key enablers for us is our learning management system or the online learning management system where the students need to access. And that point out from when we were hit by the COVID-19, when we had that major lockdown. And that's where I think most of the Pacific Islands as well shift from the traditional way of delivering and teaching to online, full online platform. And that happens, I think it happens to all, but from the Pacific wise, it's a totally shift for us. And that will keep us, pushing to improve the infrastructure, robust the ecosystem in infrastructure, and also boosting the digital skills of our people. Providing an online learning management system for our students in education sector, it gives not only the university, the staff, the teachers, the support staff, but also the students. We're giving them a good idea, like boosting their knowledge of how to use internet, how to use applications online, and how to access internet. It's also considering the cybersecurity issues, where Cherie and the team came last year, and they deliver those workshops and trainings for the Pacific people, to keep them educating about using internet online. The other key enablers that I see it myself is the collaborative, it's a collaboration and partnership. Because during that time of the COVID, everything was dependent on internet. So university has to partner with the telcos so that they can give us zero SIM for our students to access the learning management system freely, the email, and some of our online resources. So when we have that time, everyone needs to work together. When we have that lockdown or remote learning, the collaborative issues that need to be partnered well, because that's where everyone needs to work together to deliver this digital inclusion. So I'll stop from there, Maureen. I'm happy to answer any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarai. I think that one of the important issues that you mentioned was that whole collaboration, and especially with PICISOC, the fact that you've been able to partner with, like what's happening regionally that you can actually, get support from. And, I think working with the APR IGF last year and then now moving to APNIC, you've got moving from an internet governance to a really a technical sort of side of things, because, the internet does have to incorporate that technical component. And so that collaboration is really, really important. And I think that does sort of lead us to, you mentioned the pandemic. And the pandemic highlighted not only the importance of digital inclusion, but as you also mentioned, the unpreparedness of many of our small island nations for this eventuality. I know that, Samoa was probably a lot more advanced in making sure that, you could actually sort of move into education, was able to sort of move more easily into that digital sort of space. But I do believe that in the Cook Islands, for example, they were totally unprepared. There was not, there wasn't enough energy that had actually been put into the whole digital side of things. And then they got hit by the pandemic. But one of the things that I wanted to look at from looking at your organizations is, what is one practical piece of advice that you, as your organization, can give the governments? I mean, it's the governments who actually sort of lead in this area. And so if you have to sort of you've been called upon to be, to give the government of our small island developing states, or our smart island digital states in the Pacific, in Africa or the Caribbean, depending on where it is that you happen to be working, to ensure that digital inclusion for prosperity in the future. I mean, this is the whole point. You raise the e-commerce, the fact that we've got young entrepreneurs, we've got these young people who've got brimming with ideas. How do we ensure that the governments themselves are aligned with what is required for their countries to actually sort of be economically productive? We'll go back to you, Teresa.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Yes, no, this is of course an important topic. This panel is also about inclusion and prosperity. But I would again like to stress the necessary link we need to have of inclusion and prosperity to cybersecurity, to cyber in general, because that is kind of a topic that is not explored in practice as much as we would like. And it was also this which was behind the efforts of the GFC to try to connect these two discourses a little bit more, because security and digital development are so closely related. And it was also in this spirit that we started with our partners and hosts, I would say, kind of a unique event, the GC3B, the Global Conference on Cyber Capacity Building, which really tried to bring these two discussions together. The last edition, the first edition, took place in Ghana. The next one will take place next year in Switzerland, in Geneva. And what I think is quite relevant and what I hope might give some inspiration to governments attending this event or from small island developing states in general, is that the conference produced quite a concrete outcome document, which we refer to as the Accra Call, which basically really tries to strengthen kind of the role of cyber resilience as an enabler for sustainable development, which again tries to advance this demand-driven, effective, and sustainable cyber capacity building, which also tries to foster stronger partnerships and better coordination that I've already been talking about. And what is obviously a very big relevance is to unlock more financial resources that can then help SIDS and other countries that need that. So what I would strongly suggest is that you explore the Accra Call and help us endorse the Accra Call. It's a very simple process. There is a link, on our website that you can just click and add the name of your country or other entities. This is not just for governments, to kind of reconfirm that you agree with this approach, which will help us ultimately to bring even more political awareness, to this issue, and really can have some direct benefits for a question. You can be in touch with me you can be in touch with our hubs that some of our colleagues are actually present in this call as well, with PUA, Thaya for the Pacific, or others. But don't hesitate to just drop us an email. We would go through, and together, we can then really put it a bit higher on the political agenda. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Teresa. Cherie, what's something that NetSafe could suggest to the New Zealand government or the Pacific Island governments, actually?
Thanks, Maureen. From NetSafe, it would be strengthening our communities on the ground, Pacific Island communities, or even just the Pacific diaspora here in New Zealand, or generally the New Zealand communities, working with what's already on the ground and deconflicting. From me personally, I had about 4 points because listening to all the speakers today, the reality is that internet is a way of life for us. We operate, we live, our societies operate. So however that is, it's through the internet or related to the internet or around the internet. And when we're the focus in the past, right until today, was getting our communities online. So now that everybody is online, it's digital transformation. And so I'm hoping that, digital transformation goes hand in hand with what Teresa said, cybersecurity. While we are advancing our technology, we are also looking at how to keep our systems safe and our communities safe. And so that comes with education of our societies, whether that's through community champions or through education materials. Our internet has gone so far ahead, our education is still catching up, and we don't want to change our education because it would mean an overhaul. And changing an overhaul of the systems would mean that we might have to pay for an added person to bring in online safe materials into the schools, because the teachers are already overworked, are already tired, already trying to manage the schools and the teaching curriculum. How are they going to put the safe online materials and content online themselves, or teach it themselves if they themselves are not aware of it? And they have been teaching like this for so many years and then having to teach like this differently now. And in New Zealand, when we came into New Zealand last year, we had, coming from the Pacific, we had to learn to put my 14-year-old online. But now this year, primary schools are going online. And so our kids in our schools are getting these tablets, and they're learning how to use Google Classrooms, and they are having their own blog, and everything that they are learning is going into these blogs. And so my 8-year-old comes home in the afternoon with his small laptop, which I don't know how he was allowed to bring in the first place, which will get connected to my internet at home, which I have to worry about the security of our devices and whether anything is going to get passed on through there. And then having to teach him, he can't just access it. He's clicking and he's clicking, he's clicking, he's wondering why his page is not loading because it has to connect to the Wi-Fi. But after getting him onto the Wi-Fi, getting him to that page, just the whole thing around education of how to, education materials around staying safe online has to go hand in hand with the changes in the curriculum, not just getting our kids online and that's it, or getting our communities online and that's it. The other one was, I don't know if anybody is aware that there was a 5.0 earthquake in Tonga yesterday morning. And so, disaster resilience, and if there was a tsunami after that, we probably have been having a different conversation because the SID director was not going to be online this morning. But thankfully, there was no tsunami. But it's how we live in the Pacific Islands. Every day there's an earthquake. Every day global warming, the tides are going up, and we'll probably get washed away in another 5-10 years. And the other one was AI is here to stay. And, we haven't got digital transformation sorted out, and AI is already here, and we'll have to figure out our way around that. Thank you, Maureen.
Wow, you certainly have brought up quite a lot of issues, and especially, AI, but the climate change issue, and Tonga has, and Papua New Guinea. There's so many, as you say, there's something happening every day, and we, the small island states, really do have to put up with quite a lot of, quite a lot in relation to it. But looking at there are certainly, I like the idea of the community champions, for example, and that's something that actually could come from PICISOC. if we're going to be filtering, community champions across the Pacific, which is what you deal with.
Thank you, Maureen. Yes, working with the community, I think, as I mentioned before, it's a collaborative work because the government can't do it themselves. The education can't do it themselves. The regulation, the legislation can't do it themselves. Because the people-centric, it's the key of all these developments that we engage to do it. So yes, you mentioned that with the PKSOC, we work closely with other organizations like APNIC, ICANN, and recently, as you know, that we are part of the ALEC as well. It's very good to be part of those organizations and get engaged so that we learn from other champions. So from the Pacific, from the PKSOC as well, with this continuous collaboration, continuous sharing successful stories on our mailing list is another way to learn from other countries, from other perspective. But for the SIDS, for the Samoa IT Association, they were like a lifesaver during the lockdown, during the COVID. Not only the university, continue providing their online learning, but also that society came and helped out other schools in providing their Moodle. So if you have that engagement with the community, especially the special group, that they have the skills and knowledge to do it, then those are the people that we need to tap in. But in general, the investment of the government that needs to put into this digital inclusion is the infrastructure development. As we know, in the Pacific, all of our islands are remotely connected. So we want to have that infrastructure in place so that to improve the internet connectivity, as Shireen mentioned, internet everything, so that including the broadband infrastructure to be improved, our mobile networks, as well as our last mile connectivity to remote areas. And also our people need to embrace the technologies like the internet, like the satellite, the fiber optics in place. We need to have both in the Pacific. We learned from Tonga when they were hit by that tsunami, lake Samoa as well, when we hit by tsunami, the earthquake and the volcano in Tonga. So the connectivity was all locked down. So we need to have both, like in the aerial as well as the ground, so that the continuity of our work can be done. The other thing that we need to look at is to strengthen the cybersecurity measures that my fellows here mentioned. So we need to invest in those robust cybersecurity infrastructure and policies because everything's online. Our kids' life will be, it's not safe. But having those measures in place and keep educating our people of how to use it, then we freely, and then we say internet is open, not close it, but keep the internet open so that our people can access it and freely use it as they're free in space. Just to wrap up my comments, it's this collaborative work like we have here with the SIDS and CTU. If we don't have this collaboration, we never heard from other people, even it SIDS, the small island states. I think it's a continuity that we need to see how sustainable this will be. And we need other people to come as well, to share their successful stories, the challenges and how they fix it. So continually have this collaborative regionally and internationally so that we have that, learn the best practice and share the resources because we don't have enough resources here in the Pacific. I'll close it from here, Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. In fact, you actually sort of like encapsulated everything that we've actually sort of like raised during this half hour or 40 minutes that we've actually had. But I would like to now, because we wanted to also include the African sort of like participation in our session, I'd like to end our session because we're sort of like at the end of our time anyway. But with they're going to play Mahendranath's presentation that he prepared because he knew that suspected that he might not have good connectivity today. So thank you so much, all of you, for being with us as early in the morning or late at night for you, Teresa. And I really do appreciate it. And I hope that the CTU team has got the video presentation ready to close our session. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, good morning. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to be a panel speaker in this session on digital inclusion for prosperity. Today I am addressing you in my capacity as the Deputy Presiding Officer of the African Union ECOSOC and Treasurer of GCAP, and I will speak on digital inclusion in Mauritius and Africa. In our rapidly evolving world, digital technology has become the backbone of progress and development. However, to fully harness its potential, we must ensure that everyone can access and use these technologies so as not to leave anyone behind. Digital inclusion is about providing all individuals and communities, especially the most disadvantaged, access to information communication technology. This goes beyond mere access to the internet and digital devices, and it includes the skills, knowledge, and confidence to utilize these technologies to enhance their lives. Africa, with its diverse cultures and dynamic economies, stands at a crucial juncture. The continent is home to some of the world's fastest growing economies and a burgeoning youth population eager to innovate and lead. Yet, the digital divide remains a significant barrier to unleashing this potential. In Mauritius, known for its progressive policies and economic resilience, digital inclusion is equally critical for sustaining growth and ensuring that all citizens benefit from technological advancements. Digital inclusion drives prosperity in multiple ways. Number one, economic empowerment. Access to digital tools and services can create new economic opportunities, particularly for small and medium enterprises. It enables entrepreneurs to reach broader markets, innovate, and compete globally. For instance, mobile banking and digital payments have revolutionized commerce in many African countries, providing financial services to the unbanked and underbanked populations. Number two, education and skills development. Digital platforms can democratize education, offering quality learning resources and training to everyone, regardless of the geographical location. E-learning and online courses will equip individuals with the skills needed to thrive in the modern workforce, fostering a culture of continuous learning and adaptation. And health improvement. Telemedicine and digital health services can bridge the gap in healthcare access, especially in remote and underserved areas. These technologies can facilitate remote consultations, health monitoring, and dissemination of vital health information, and improving overall health outcomes. While the benefits of digital inclusion are clear, the path to achieving it is fraught and challenging. The increase in internet use has also paved the way for the proliferation of its dark side, with a rampant spread of misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech, the regular occurrence of data breaches, and an increase in cybercrimes. These include infrastructure deficits, high costs of connectivity, digital literacy gaps, and socio-economic inequalities. Addressing these challenges requires a multifaceted approach. Number one, investing in infrastructure. Expanding broadband networks and ensuring reliable, affordable internet access is fundamental. Public-private partnerships can play a pivotal role in building the necessary infrastructure, especially in rural and underserved regions. Number two, affordable access. Efforts must be made to reduce the cost of digital devices and services. Subsidies, innovative financing models, and competitive markets can help make technology more affordable for everybody. And lastly, enhancing digital literacy. Providing education and training programs to improve digital skills is very crucial. This includes not just basic digital literacy, but also advanced technical skills to prepare individuals for the digital economy. Achieving digital inclusion for prosperity is not a task for any single entity. It requires collaboration across governments, the private sector, civil society, and also international organizations. By improving together, we can pool resources, share knowledge, and develop comprehensive strategies that address the diverse needs for our communities. Digital inclusion is not just a technological imperative, it is a socio-economic necessity. It is about empowering individuals, fostering innovation, and driving sustainable development. For Africa and Mauritius, embracing digital inclusion means unlocking the potential of our people, fostering inclusive growth, and building resilience for prosperous societies. As a civil society organization, we are dedicated to bridging the digital divide and fostering digital inclusion for all. Our initiatives include providing affordable access to internet and digital devices through community partnerships and subsidies, conducting, of course, digital literacy training programs to equip individuals with essential skills, and advocating for inclusive policies that support equitable access to ICTs. We collaborate with governments, private sector partners, and other NGOs to build infrastructure, promote digital rights, and ensure that marginalized communities are not left behind. By empowering people with the tools and knowledge to participate in the digital world, we aim to drive sustainable development and inclusive prosperity. Let us commit to this vision of a digitally inclusive future where every individual, regardless of their background or location, has the opportunity to thrive in the digital age. Together, we can turn the promise of digital technology into tangible progress for all. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Okay. Any closing words, Maureen?
No, that will do it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for coordinating that. And I think we are through the main program for part one of our second SIDS IGF. I'm happy to see our CTU Secretary General, Mr. Rodney Taylor, back online after his in-person event, and I'll give him the opportunity now for closing remarks and Rodney, over to you.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good night, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm speaking here from SIDS4 in Antigua and Barbuda, and I'm really very pleased that we were able to pull off this part one of our virtual of our SIDS IGF, the second SIDS IGF. It's really a dream come true, as it were. And it's really great to see this conference here focusing at the international level on the unique requirements of small island development states. And the reception here has been great with respect to the issue of digital issues and internet governance issues. For SIDS persons who have not really understood, this is an opportunity for them to discuss. Of course, the first SIDS conference was hosted in Barbados in 1994, and it was convened to address specific and unique vulnerabilities to small island developing states. And we have been seeking to do the same, draw the attention to to the unique issues of SIDS within internet governance spaces. And so we are very appreciative of the work that's been done by the DC SIDS, the Dynamic Coalition SIDS within the UN IGF process, champions and the likes of Tracy, Shaw, Maureen, and others, of course. And we at CTU are committed to lending our full support because we understand that even though we're small and vulnerable, that we are also very strong, in particular when we work together. And we've been pushing within ICANN, we've been pushing within the ITU, and we will continue to advocate. So we could not have allowed this SIDS4 conference to be hosted in our own backyard and not take the opportunity to draw attention to the issue of internet governance and digital development within internet governance spaces. As you know, coming out of this SIDS4 meeting, there will be Antigua and Barbuda agenda for SIDS called ABAS, A-B-A-S. And within that, there's actually some provision it's for efforts to establish a SIDS Center of Excellence in Antigua and Barbuda that will be launched at this meeting, and will include a SIDS data hub, a technology and innovation mechanism, and an island investment forum. I've already reached out to Minister Nicholas, who sits on the General Conference of the CTU, to understand fully what the implications are for this and how we can get involved and how it can help to add some fuel in the tank, as it were, to our efforts of promoting SIDS within digital spaces. I spoke earlier today on, in fact, I just came out of a session speaking about early warning systems for all, and how technology can be leveraged to help mitigate the harmful effects of natural disasters. Yesterday, I spoke also in an ITU session on meaningful connectivity. These are issues we will continue to seek resources for within international organizations. And, as I said, we are strong together, and we need to ensure that the organizations that speak about a multi-stakeholder model create a space for SIDS. We're not a geographic region. We're not recognized in some cases, or we are slowly gaining recognition within IG processes and spaces as a unique group. And therefore, we need to continue to advocate for that. So let's continue. We know that this requires a great deal of effort to pull these things off, especially in different time zones. So we thank everyone who's agreed to take the time to speak and contribute today. And thanks to the team as well for consistently ensuring that we have dotted all the I's across all the T's. Thank you, Tamika, for your valiant efforts to get speakers here at the last minute in some cases. Tomorrow we have the in-person event. We are hoping that we can stream that, but the connectivity is not 100% here, but we'll do our best. We do have part 2 more in person, a very small room, capacity of 70. In any event, we've made arrangements to record it and to ensure that the outputs from both this meeting and that meeting tomorrow feed into the UN process and is reflected in the report of this SIDS4. So from Antigua and Barbuda, I want to again express my appreciation, sign off, and hoping that we can reconnect again tomorrow. But in any event, we will make sure that we share those discussions with you at some point online. Over to you, Nigel. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, SG. And as he mentioned, the second SIDS IGF continues tomorrow, through the in-person meeting, which we will do our best to at least live stream so that you can follow. It would start at 2 p.m. local time, which is like 1800 UTC, and it'll run for 90 minutes. So, and in it, we again would, I think, continue discussions on some of the themes that came out today, like mention was made of a whole of society approach, people first and so on, and we'll be having more presentations on that and the vulnerabilities and the risks. And we'll also have a panel discussion with more focus on global digital governance. So we hope you can, well, we hope you'll be successful in having you share it with us almost live tomorrow, but as Yeshi said, failing that, we should have it, we should be able to record it and post it for your later review. So let me say thank you very much to all of you who connected and endured all the way to the end and on this virtual event. I'd also like to thank personally our CTU support staff. In addition to what the SG has already said, I'll add my own personal thanks to the great efforts they made in putting it all together and keeping it running towards the end. So thanks all, and we'll sign off now and hopefully join you, or at least hopefully you can join us tomorrow at 1800 UTC or 2 p.m. at Antigua time. Thank you very much. Bye.
Record.